Welcome to Wife Cheating Story. I hope you have an enjoyable and relaxing time listening. Let's get started.
She told him she'd see him that night. But when Rob arrived home, Erin was gone. Her car untouched, her belongings scattered, and a suitcase missing. The police said adults leave all the time, brushing off his fears. 3 months later, his daughter, Katie, vanishes under eerily similar circumstances. A chilling voicemail, "Hey!" and a witness spotting a girl in a mysterious car ignite Rob's desperate search for answers. Were they taken? Or was there something more sinister hiding in the shadows of his perfect family? You're either the most unfortunate man alive, or there's more to this story, the detective warned. Day 1. Rob Walsh thumped his hands on the steering wheel in frustration. It was already 6 p.m., and he had promised Katie he would be home by 6. The traffic on Highway 53 was backed up for a mile near I-35, and there was no way to get home faster. It looked like construction at the intersection was still going on, even though it was supposed to be done yesterday. He picked up his phone and called Katie. She answered right away and didn't sound too upset about him being late. She said she would try to wait for dinner but could reheat it if needed. "Just be careful," she added. "You're doing great, Katie. Your mom would be proud of you. You're already an amazing cook at 14. "I'll hurry home," Rob replied. Fortunately, the traffic cleared up quickly, and Rob reached home on 2nd Avenue by 6:15. Katie met him at the door and said, "Hurry up, Dad. Dinner is ready. I need to finish fast because I have to study for my math exam. I'm sorry for being late, honey. I tried hard to get here, but with the construction on 53, it was difficult. If I had known they still weren't done, I would have taken Skyline Drive." Katie had made pork chops, baked potatoes, mixed vegetables, and a salad. Rob praised her cooking, and she told him not to mention it, saying she was only making meals until her mom got back. They shared a small smile, but the rest of the dinner passed in silence with no further talk about her mother. Once they finished eating, Rob encouraged Katie to go study while he cleaned up the table and washed the dishes. He promised he would join her later to help. As he worked, he thought about Erin, his wife, and how she had been missing for 3 months. He wished they could find out where she was or get any news about her. He had called Eric Mackey, the lead detective in her case, again that day. As usual, the detective dismissed his concerns, saying she would come back when she decided to. He told Rob there was nothing new to report, but would let him know if there were any updates. Rob had grown used to this response, hearing it every time he called for the past 3 months. No matter what anyone else thought, Rob couldn't believe that Erin had left without saying anything, or that she would abandon Katie. After tidying up the kitchen, Rob went to check on Katie to see how her studying was going. He figured she probably wouldn't need his help, but he offered it anyway. After telling her to call if she needed anything, he went to the living room to read the newspaper and watch the evening news. He always felt anxious about watching the news, but he knew he had to. Even though he recognized it was possible that Erin was gone, each day that the news did not report on an unidentified woman brought him some comfort. It was another day filled with hope that she was safe and would return home one day. Rob spent the evening trying to relax after a long day at work. He was a senior programmer at Eclipse Software, where he had worked for 8 years. Since Erin went missing a month ago, Rob had asked for more work to keep his mind busy. The company agreed and gave him a big project. He was deep into it now, working on something that probably should have taken 2 people. He started to worry that he had too much on his plate, which might affect his health. While the extra work helped distract him during the day, it did little to calm him at night. Every evening, when he lay in bed alone, he found himself thinking about what could have happened to Erin. After the news and finishing his reading, Rob reached for the photograph on the table next to his chair. It was taken last Christmas, showing the 3 of them happily together in front of their Christmas tree. They clearly looked like a loving family, with arms around each other and real smiles on their faces. Rob and Erin were very close in height, with Erin just 2 inches shorter than Rob's 5'10". They both had brown hair, though Erin's was a bit darker. Katie was a little shorter than Erin, but both parents told her that she would probably grow more. She hoped they were right because she loved sports and felt being taller would help. She shared their brown hair but had added a large blonde streak on one side. The three of them also had similar dark brown eyes. Rob had taken other pictures during Christmas, but he had already given some of Erin's photos to the police. He kept a few family photos in a drawer in the table and would take them out a couple of times each week to look through them. Tonight was no different as he looked at Erin's pictures. Some of the photos were from their wedding year, and Rob enjoyed recalling how happy they had been back then. Most nights he felt emotional while looking at the photos, and tears often filled his eyes. After studying the pictures, he would put them away and lie back to think about all that had happened. As Rob leaned back in his recliner this evening, he closed his eyes and began to remember the details of that March night. Every time he thought about that day, he hoped to remember something new, something he had missed during all the times he replayed the events of that evening and the following days. He needed something to take to Eric Mackey, something that would show Mackey that Erin did not leave on her own. Rob always started his memory from the moment he woke up that morning. It was Tuesday, March 4th, and he was up, as usual, at 6:30 a.m. The alarm was set for 6:35, but he liked to get up early to turn it off before it could wake Erin. After getting dressed, he went to the kitchen to start the coffee. Then he took care of his morning routine in the bathroom. By the time he was done, the coffee was ready, and he went to wake Erin. After she washed her face and brushed her teeth, Erin joined him for coffee. They talked about their plans for the day. Erin mentioned she would be leaving for her job at the Penny's store in the mall at 9:30. Rob needed to be at work by 8 a.m., so he left home at 7:30, like he always did. Erin said goodbye at the door and told him she would see him that night. As he closed the door, he saw Katie coming into the kitchen in her pajamas. 7:30 was when she usually got up, and later she told him what happened that morning until she left for school at 8:45. Katie said their mother had been just fine, and the only thing she remembered her saying that was a bit different was to take an umbrella since rain was forecast for later in the day. Rob remembered that his day at work was normal. Nothing unusual occurred. He didn't receive any odd phone calls or messages. He left for home at 4:30 and arrived just before 5, as he typically did. On a normal day, he would expect Erin to be at home when he walked in. That day, she wasn't. But at first, he didn't think it was strange, as she sometimes stopped at the supermarket or the dry cleaners. Katie was already home and in her room. After he took off his shoes, jacket, and tie, Rob knocked on Katie's door. When she told him to come in, he peeked inside and asked if her mother had called. Katie replied, "No." By 5:30, Rob started to feel worried. Erin had never been this late coming home from work. He called Penny's and learned that Erin had not clocked in that morning. He couldn't understand this because she hadn't mentioned taking the day off or having other plans. Then he went to the garage and saw that her car was still parked inside, which made him even more anxious. Erin wasn't in the house, and it seemed like she hadn't even left for work that morning. After 5:30, Rob went to Katie's room and asked her to help him look around the house for any sign of her mother. Everything seemed normal until Rob noticed something unusual in the bedroom. Their bedroom had a large closet used for clothes for different seasons, and it usually had a couple of suitcases inside. When Rob looked in the closet, he saw that one of the suitcases was missing. He and Katie started to search the bedroom more carefully and noticed that some of Erin's clothes and most of her cosmetics were gone. Katie also checked her mother's dresser drawers and saw that some items were missing. Once Rob and Katie figured out that some of Erin's things were gone along with her, Rob decided to call Erin's family and friends to see if anyone knew where she might be. It took him almost an hour to reach them all, and no one had heard from Erin that day. Rob especially asked Erin's friends if she had talked about taking a trip or going anywhere, and they all said she hadn't mentioned anything unusual. By then, it was after 6:30, and Rob was feeling more and more worried. He went to the nearby houses to ask if anyone had seen Erin. No one had noticed her that day at all. At 7 o'clock, Rob called for help. The operator told him that a car would be sent as soon as possible. For the next half hour, Rob and Katie sat together on the sofa, trying to comfort each other. A little after 7:30, a police car arrived, and two officers, a man and a woman, came to the door. Officers Johnson and Aikman came in to hear Rob's report. Rob explained that he had come home to find his wife missing and that her car was still in the garage, along with a suitcase and some clothing. As he told them what happened, he noticed the officers exchanged concerned looks several times. After explaining everything, Rob offered to give them a picture of Erin. It was then they told him it wasn't necessary to file a missing persons report for Erin until she had been gone for at least 24 hours. Since no one could say for sure that she had disappeared until late in the afternoon, they would not be able to file the report until that time the following day. Officer Johnson asked Rob to call again the next afternoon if she still hadn't been found. At that moment, Katie began to cry, saying the police had to help find her mother. Officer Aikman tried to explain that sometimes adults just needed time alone, but Katie was very upset and ran to her room in tears. Rob realized there was nothing he could say to change the officers' minds, and they finally left around 8 o'clock. That evening and night were incredibly hard for Rob and Katie. Rob called anyone else he could think of to see if they knew anything about Erin's disappearance. No one had any information, and soon Rob was getting calls from friends and family who were worried about Erin. By midnight, the phone calls stopped, and Rob finally got Katie to go to bed. He spent the night on the sofa, mostly awake and thinking about where she might have gone. Their morning started early, with both Rob and Katie up at 6:30 a.m. Katie said she had managed to sleep a little, while Rob knew he had dozed off a few times. They each had a cup of coffee to wake up, and then sat at the kitchen table to talk about the events of the previous night. Rob suggested they figure out exactly what was missing from the house. After getting dressed, he took a notepad, and they walked around the house, carefully checking all the drawers and shelves for missing items. The only thing they agreed on was that a new photo of the three of them, which had been on an end table in the living room, was no longer there. When they finished checking the house, they went to the master bedroom that Rob and Erin shared. They started by looking in the storage closet. The only thing they could confirm was that one suitcase was gone. The clothes stored in the closet were for the summer, so Rob wasn't surprised that everything else seemed to be in place. Katie noted which cosmetics were missing and made a list. Together, they checked the closet and the drawer for clothes, writing down what they thought was missing. Katie also noticed that some socks and 2 pairs of shoes were gone, along with her purse. Neither of them felt very hungry, so lunch was simple. Katie made each of them a sandwich while Rob poured cold drinks. After finishing her meal, Katie asked Rob if he thought her mother had left them. Rob was quite upset that Katie would even think that and assured her mother wouldn't leave without telling her. Katie seemed to understand how her question bothered her father and came over to hug him, apologizing for asking. Just after 3 p.m., Rob called the police and asked to speak to the missing persons department. He spoke to Detective Eric Mackey, who had the report from the officers who had come the night before. Detective Mackey told Rob that since Erin was still missing, he would come by to take a formal statement. He arrived just before 4 o'clock. Rob was ready with 2 recent photos of Erin and a list of the items she seemed to have taken. Right from the start, Rob noticed Detective Mackey didn't seem to believe his claim that someone had forced Erin to leave. After taking Rob's statement, he shared his concern that it looked like Erin had left on her own. He mentioned he had never heard of someone being taken who stopped to pack a suitcase or grab a purse. He said he would write his report but told them not to get their hopes up. Rob tried many times to get Detective Mackey to think differently about Erin's disappearance, but it didn't work. Detective Mackey left just after 5, promising only to list her as a missing person and inform nearby police. As he drove away, Rob and Katie were in tears, facing another anxious evening and sleepless night. The next few days passed in a blur for Rob. Neither he nor Katie wanted to leave the house in case Erin called. Rob used his vacation time to stay home for the rest of the week, and Katie missed school. By the start of the next week, they knew they had to try to return to their normal lives. On that Monday, they began a new routine to help them cope. During the second week, Rob and Katie made missing person flyers. They included 2 pictures of Erin and a description, along with Rob's cell phone number and the police numbers in Duluth. They spent the weekend putting up flyers around Duluth and Superior, Wisconsin, and even went to Cloquet and 2 Harbors. They posted flyers in every store, gas station, and restaurant that would let them. In the 3 months since Erin disappeared, they had not received any news about her. There were many false hopes that made them feel good, but those hopes faded when the police looked into them. Now even the false hopes and strange calls had stopped coming. Rob was still in his chair when Katie came out to say goodnight at 11 p.m. "I bet you're still thinking about Mom, aren't you, Dad? You should try to get some sleep so you won't be so tired every day," Katie said. Rob looked up at his daughter standing next to his chair. She saw tears in his eyes as he replied, "I can't help it, Katie. I know she didn't just leave us like the police think, but I don't understand how she could disappear like this. I believe someone took her, but how can we prove it to the police? And how can we find her? I believe with all my heart that she will come back to us someday, Dad. I just feel she is alive and wants to be with us. Maybe we should put up more signs so anyone who has seen her can contact us." "I wish I had done that right away, Katie. I trusted the police too much. I never thought they would overlook her absence. They just don't know her like we do," said Rob. "You should go to bed now, sweetie. You have a test in the morning." Katie kissed her dad goodnight and went to bed. Rob sat quietly for 5 more minutes, staring at the ceiling and wiping away his tears, before he finally got up and went to bed. Day 2. Tuesday, June 10th started like any other day in the Walsh house. Rob was up at his usual time and got dressed and ready for work by 7:30. Before leaving, he woke Katie and made sure she was out of bed. She would have her breakfast and leave for school at 8:45. As was his routine, Rob called Katie on her cell phone at 8:30 to check if she was on schedule. When she picked up, he said, "Hi, sweetie. I just want to make sure you'll be ready on time." "Dad, you don't need to worry. I'll be there on time, especially today. I only have 2 more exams after this. I'll see you tonight for dinner," Katie replied. Rob worked steadily throughout the day, taking only a few breaks for coffee and lunch. He enjoyed his job, and the day usually passed quickly. He wrote a lot of code and fixed most of it before leaving at 4:30. The trip home was smoother than the day before, and he got home just after 5 p.m. When he walked in, he expected to see Katie in the kitchen starting dinner, but the kitchen was empty and looked just like it had when he left. He called out, "Katie, I'm home," but there was no answer. Rob walked to Katie's room and knocked on the door. "Come on, sunshine, wake up in there. If you're tired, you can go to bed early tonight." When he heard no reply, he opened the door and found the room empty. Katie's books were on her bed, along with her bag. Rob picked up the bag and noticed it felt heavy. Looking inside, he found Katie's uneaten lunch. Confused, he frowned. Rob walked back into the kitchen and looked around for any sign that Katie had been there. There was nothing to show she had come home since morning. Just then, he noticed the light flashing on their answering machine, signaling that he had a message. He stepped over and pressed play. The message came through. "Hello, this is East Division High School calling for Katie Walsh. Our records show you missed an exam this morning. Please call the office as soon as you can." Rob's puzzled look changed to worry. Katie would never miss an exam unless she was unwell, and she hadn't told him about any problems. Thinking she might need help, he called both hospitals, but neither had admitted anyone today named Katie. Rob started searching the house for Katie, but he still couldn't find her. His anxiety grew. He rushed through the rooms again, searching for any sign of her. He went to her room and even looked in the closet, but found nothing. When Rob checked his bedroom again and opened the storage closet, he was shocked to see that the suitcase was gone. He stepped back in surprise, sat on the edge of his bed, and said, "Oh no, this can't be happening again. It must be a mistake." He hurried back to her room and looked closely in her closet. There were empty spots where hangers should have been, but he didn't know enough about her clothes to tell what was missing. When he opened her dresser drawers, they didn't have as many socks and other things as he expected. After checking the room and her small makeup table, Rob noticed that some items he typically saw there were not there. He also couldn't find her phone or wallet. Feeling frantic, Rob dashed to the kitchen phone and dialed 911. When he reached the operator, he struggled to explain that his 14-year-old daughter was missing. The operator assured him that a patrol car would come right away. After ending the call, Rob remembered he hadn't tried to call Katie on her phone, so he quickly dialed her number. After 2 rings, a recorded voice said that the phone was either out of service or turned off. He tried again with the same result. Next, he called two of Katie's closest friends. Neither had heard from her since yesterday and had no idea why she was absent. He asked them to reach out to other friends to see if anyone knew where Katie might be. Just after he hung up from the second call, there was a loud knock at the front door. When he opened the door, he saw Officers Johnson and Aikman. "Thank you for coming. My daughter is missing, and I can't find any trace of her," he said urgently. The two officers followed him to his daughter's room. He pointed out her lunch bag and the almost empty drawers. He told them about the missing suitcase and that she had missed her morning exam. By the time he finished, Officer Johnson was using his radio to request Detective Mackey to come to the Walsh home. While they waited, the officers searched the garage and went through the house again. Just before Detective Mackey arrived, both girls Rob had called earlier called back to say no one else had any idea where Katie might be. Hearing this, Rob sat down at the kitchen table, his head in his hands. "What has happened to her?" he exclaimed. When Detective Mackey walked in, he approached Rob with a serious look and asked, "What's happening here? You're saying your daughter is missing just like your wife was 3 months ago?" "That's exactly what's happened," Rob replied. "I got home from work tonight and found that Katie was not there. She didn't go to school for her exam, and her suitcase was missing. I also didn't see her phone or wallet in the house." After listening to Rob, Detective Mackey turned to the two officers by the door. "You checked the whole house? Did you find anything unusual?" Officer Johnson replied, "There are no signs of Katie here. We haven't found any proof of a struggle or anything like that." Mackey turned back to Rob and said, "You're either having an incredibly bad day or something else is going on. When was the last time you saw or spoke to your daughter, Mr. Walsh?" "I saw her at 7:30 this morning when I was leaving for work. I called her on her phone at 8:30 to see if she was ready for school, and that was the last time I heard from her," Rob explained. "What about last night, Mr. Walsh? Was there any problem between you and your daughter? Did you two argue about something last night?" "Not at all," Rob said. "She was studying in her room for her math exam. Around 11 o'clock, she came out to say goodnight, and that was the end of the evening." "Well, I find it odd that you have reported 2 similar cases in 3 months. First, you contacted us about your wife disappearing with her suitcase and some belongings, saying she didn't leave on her own. Now you say the same thing has happened to your daughter." "That's exactly what I mean," said Rob. "Everything happened just like I said." Detective Mackey walked over to the 2 uniformed officers and spoke quietly with them. Rob could not hear what they said, but they seemed to agree on something, as he noticed them nodding. Detective Mackey turned back to Rob and said, "Please stay here. I'm going to have the officers check the house." The 3 of them walked down the hallway, leaving Rob sitting at the kitchen table. He held his head in one hand, feeling very worried about Katie. She was only 14, and he wondered if she could look after herself if she had been taken. He thought about everything trying to understand Katie's disappearance, but he was not having any better luck than he did with his wife's situation. Almost 5 minutes passed before Mackey and the 2 patrol officers returned to the kitchen. Detective Mackey said to Rob, "I'm bringing in the forensics team to search the house for any clues. While they work, I want you to come back to the station with me. I'm sure we'll have many more questions. Thank you for taking this seriously. When my wife disappeared, I told you something was wrong, and now it feels like the same thing is happening to my daughter." "I'll do whatever it takes to help find them," said Rob. "Put on your coat and come with me now. These officers will wait here for the forensics team. I'll need your car keys, too, as we want to check the vehicles and the house. If there's anything here, they will find it." "Is there anything else you can think of, or anything you'd like to say?" asked Detective Mackey. "Nothing else comes to mind right now," replied Rob. Rob went to the hall closet and grabbed his coat. He was putting it on as he stepped outside, following Detective Mackey to his car. Rob sat in the passenger seat and they drove away. Officers Johnson and Aikman waited until the car was out of sight before they settled down in the kitchen. They quickly took off their caps and relaxed while waiting for the forensics unit to arrive. They knew it would take at least half an hour, so they appreciated the break. During the drive from Rob's home to the Duluth police station, there was little conversation between him and Detective Mackey. The detective was deep in thought about how to handle the upcoming questioning of Rob. Rob was lost in his own worries, struggling to understand what might have happened to his daughter, Katie. Nothing he thought made sense, and every idea he had only made him more anxious about her safety. The drive to the station took about 10 minutes. After getting off the elevator on the 3rd floor, Detective Mackey led Rob to a small room labeled Interrogation Room 6. Rob guessed this room was chosen so they could talk quietly about what might have happened at the Walsh home. He sat down and tried to get comfortable while Detective Mackey went to get the file on Erin's disappearance. The detective was gone for about 5 minutes, and during that time, Rob leaned back in his chair, closed his eyes, and tried again to make sense of everything. It felt like an impossible task. When Detective Mackey returned, he had removed his jacket and rolled up his sleeves. Normally calm and thoughtful, Rob soon noticed that the detective seemed more focused and intense. He also realized he no longer had the same victim status in the detective's eyes. That change became clear with the detective's first question. "So, what's been happening at your home? Did a family disagreement get out of hand?" "What do you mean a disagreement? There hasn't been any conflict at home. We all get along well." "What are you saying?" Rob responded. "Well, it seems something serious happened in your home. Did you and your wife have an argument 3 months ago? Did anything happen that your daughter might have seen or heard? The forensics team will find even the smallest bit of evidence, no matter how well you think you cleaned up," said Mackey. "Are you serious? How can you even ask me that? There is no evidence of anything in our home. I didn't harm my wife or daughter." "What happened is exactly what I told you," Rob replied, frustration clear in his voice. "When my wife went missing, you did nothing, and now my daughter is gone, and you want to blame me?" Rob said, placing his hands on the table in exasperation. Mackey looked at Rob, his face showing no emotion. After a few moments, he spoke softly. "You seem to get upset very easily. Do you often lose your temper? Is that what happened? Did something go wrong at home?" Rob took a deep breath, forcing himself to calm down. He realized that if he showed Mackey how troubled he was by the questions, it would only make things worse. "I have done nothing to cause the disappearance of my wife or daughter. Everything I've told you is true. I just want to find them, so please ask me any questions that will help you trust me. I don't want to waste more time searching for them. Let me summarize to make sure I understand. 3 months ago, you came home to find your wife missing. She didn't go to work and instead packed a bag and left without a word. Now you come home to find your daughter is also gone. She packed a bag and disappeared like her mother. They took some clothes and personal things. No one has seen anything, and you expect me to just accept your story," Detective Mackey stated. "That's exactly what happened. You have the details right," Rob said. "Now we need to decide what steps we will take to find them." Rob looked at his watch and saw it was only 6:30. All this had happened within an hour and a half since he came home from work. Just an hour and a half ago, as he walked down the sidewalk to his house, his life felt normal, even with his missing wife. Now he was sitting in an interrogation room being questioned about his wife and daughter. It seemed impossible for everything to have gone so wrong so fast. Detective Mackey was busy taking notes in his notepad and in the file about Erin's case. He spent almost 10 minutes doing this, and Rob began to feel impatient. The longer he stayed in the room, the longer it would take to start the search for Katie. Rob knew that the forensics team likely wouldn't find anything like the evidence the detective seemed to expect. He hoped they might find something that could explain Katie's disappearance, maybe some fingerprints or a piece of evidence he hadn't seen when looking around the house. Rob took out his phone and called Katie's number again. Detective Mackey looked at him but stayed quiet. When Rob heard the same disappointing message as before, he hung up and put the phone back in his pocket. Mackey waited until Rob finished before asking, "Were you trying to call a lawyer?" "No," Rob answered. "I was trying to call Katie on her cell phone. It's either off or out of service." Detective Mackey looked at Rob with interest. He said, "Give me that number. I can arrange for it to be monitored. If the phone turns on, we might find out where she is." Rob gave him the number, and Mackey wrote it down in his notepad. He shuffled through some papers and then took everything with him, leaving the room without saying anything more. Rob stared at the door, feeling annoyed. It seemed like finding Katie would take a long time. Rob waited alone in the interrogation room for almost 30 minutes, using the time to think about what had happened to Katie. He began to feel like the police weren't doing enough to help find her. So he stood up and walked around the room while he waited. Finally, Detective Mackey came back with another man he introduced as Detective Black. "Have you decided what to do to find Katie? I really think we should do more than just talk. Shouldn't there be news reports saying she's missing? What about an alert for her? Can we do that for her age?" "I believe we need to take steps like that," Rob said. The two detectives talked quietly, and Rob couldn't hear what they said. Finally, Detective Mackey asked Rob for Katie's date of birth, height, weight, and any unique features. Realizing he hadn't given them photos of Katie, Rob took them out of the envelope he brought. One was her school picture from the fall, a good likeness except for missing the blonde streak on the left side. The second was a happy photo from Christmas. He handed over the details and the pictures. Detective Mackey shared the information with Detective Black, who then left the room. Once he was gone, Mackey started asking Rob about any disagreements that may have happened at home. Again, Rob insisted that nothing like that had ever occurred. "You do understand, Mr. Walsh, that if we find any signs of trouble in your home, your insistence that nothing happened will be questioned. It would be much easier for you if you just tell us what really happened," Detective Mackey said. "You might think we'll never uncover the full story, but I promise you, we will," Mackey said quietly, so Rob had to listen closely to understand him. Rob stood up and walked around the small room. After pacing back and forth a couple of times, he sat down across from the detective. "I'm ready to answer any questions you have or do anything to help you trust what I'm saying. Just tell me what you need from me. If you want to use lie detectors or any other method, I'm okay with that. Surely you understand why it's hard for me to believe you. Your story is quite strange, but I must say we haven't found anything yet to go against what you're saying. I'm going to talk to the forensics team to see what they've discovered. I'll be back shortly. Based on what I find, we can discuss this further," Detective Mackey replied before leaving the room. Rob felt a rush of frustration and hit the table lightly with his fists. After about 15 minutes alone, Rob leaned back and relaxed. He realized that worrying about what had happened wouldn't help. As time passed, he felt calmer. He was relieved when Detective Mackey came back into the room. "Well, the forensics team's initial report shows no signs of cleanup or any evidence that something happened. It's possible it was cleaned up very well. We'll get a clearer picture once they analyze the samples. Since we can't disprove your story for now, you can go. I'll contact you tomorrow once we have the final report," Detective Mackey said. "Does this mean you believe me now? You'll get Katie's picture on TV and in the newspapers and send out an alert for her?" "Thank goodness," Rob exclaimed. "We'll inform all newspapers, TV stations, and radio about her missing status. The alert is already issued, and we're monitoring her cell phone. We've taken both your cars for analysis, and they should finish by tomorrow. You can go for now, but expect to come back for more discussions in the coming days," Detective Mackey said, opening the door and stepping aside for Rob to exit. Rob walked to the door, but paused to ask, "How will I get home? Will someone give me a ride so I can start contacting family?" Detective Mackey answered, "Officer Aikman is here, and she will take you back to your house." The forensics team locked the place when they left, and here are your keys. We've kept the keys for both cars and will return them with the vehicles if the forensics unit no longer needs them, said Officer Aikman. Officer Aikman, a tall woman with black hair, said to Rob, "Come with me. We'll take the stairs. It's faster. My car is parked outside." Rob followed her down the stairs, trying to keep up as she moved quickly. She reached the ground floor well before him. He caught up as she got into the car and started to drive away. "Do you think they will find her? My daughter, I mean. I'm really worried. She's 14 and I can't stop thinking that someone might have taken her." He looked at Officer Aikman, hoping she would reassure him. She glanced at him for a moment before turning her attention back to the road. After a pause, she said, "I can't predict what will happen. Cases of missing people can have many outcomes. Sometimes it's just a mix-up, and sometimes it's more serious. We always take concerns about harmful people seriously, and we will pay close attention to that. It's natural to worry, especially with her age, but that's not the only scenario." "I'm afraid Detective Mackey thinks I had something to do with my wife and daughter's disappearance," Rob said. I want you to know I had nothing to do with it. I fear his doubts will stop him from truly looking for them." Officer Aikman drove a little further before answering. "I'd prefer you not to quote me on this since I might deny saying it, but I have a feeling you are being honest. I'm not in a position to tell Detective Maki what to do, but I have a couple of suggestions. First, share all the details you can think of. Second, don't leave anything out or lie. He will find out, and that could destroy trust. I've shared everything I can and haven't hidden any truths. I think now that the forensics team didn't find any signs of trouble, he might be starting to trust me. But I really need answers. My whole family is gone now. I'm going home to an empty house, and I don't know how I'll cope with that," Rob said sadly. Officer Aikman took a card from her shirt pocket and gave it to Rob. "You can reach me at this number if you want. I check it during the day for messages. I may be able to update you on the progress of this case because they keep the patrol officers informed. Also, my sister-in-law is a psychologist. She's really good, I think." Officer Aikman handed Rob a pen and encouraged him to write down the number. "You can write on that card and contact her if you feel really stressed. She is great at helping people through tough times." Rob wrote down the number and thanked her for it. He had a sense that he might need it, as he felt overwhelmed. Coping with the loss of Aaron and Katie felt impossible to him right then. It seemed like a bad dream, and Rob wondered if he would ever wake up from it. A minute later, they arrived at Rob's home. As he got out of the patrol car, Officer Aikman said, "Make sure to call my sister-in-law or me before you do anything on your own. You might not be thinking clearly right now." Rob thanked the officer and closed the car door. As he walked up the sidewalk, he turned to watch the patrol car leave. He noticed two neighbors across the street watching him from their windows. He could imagine they were all wondering what was happening at his house. He turned back and walked up the steps to his front door, unlocked it, and went inside. He walked into the kitchen and saw that the light on his answering machine was blinking. He decided to check the messages first. He hoped one would be from Katie explaining where she was, although he thought that might be too much to wish for. With a sigh, he pressed play. The first two messages were from Katie's friends, saying they had contacted everyone they knew, but had no news about Katie. He wrote down their numbers to call them back and thank them. The third call seemed to be a wrong number. He heard only a sound before it went silent. The next message was from his brother-in-law, asking if he had any updates about Katie. The last two calls were from neighbors offering their help. He added those 3 numbers to his list of callbacks. After erasing the messages, he looked in the fridge for something quick to eat, realizing he hadn't had dinner. He settled on a cold pork chop and an apple, which he ate quickly. Once he finished, he rinsed his hands under the kitchen tap and dried them on a paper towel. He walked through his home to see if there were any signs the investigation team had been there. He noticed a bit of powder in the bathroom, likely from fingerprinting. It seemed someone had looked through the drawers in his bedroom and Katie's, but nothing appeared to be missing. After checking the rest of the house, he returned to the kitchen. In the cupboard above the fridge, he found a few half-filled bottles. He picked his favorite, a bottle of scotch. He sat at the kitchen table and poured himself a small glass. After taking a sip, he picked up his cell phone and started calling the numbers from the messages left on the answering machine. He thanked each caller, then leaned back in his chair and took another sip of his drink. He thought about the events of the day and began to worry more about how things would turn out. He turned on the radio to a local station, hoping for news about Katie's disappearance. Within 5 minutes, he heard the Amber Alert message he hoped the police would send out. Detective Maki had kept that promise. He got up and walked into the living room to check if local TV stations were sharing similar news. As he flipped through the channels, he saw that 2 of them were showing information about the Amber Alert at the bottom of the screen. He felt relieved to know that the commitment had been kept. He sat in his favorite chair and picked up a photo from the table beside him. Looking at the picture of himself, Aaron and Katie made his eyes fill with tears. Before putting the photo back, he promised himself he would not just wait for the police to take care of things like he did when Aaron went missing. This time, he would do everything he could to keep Katie's case important and ensure it wouldn't be forgotten like Aaron's had been. He decided to take action. He went back to the kitchen, poured another drink, and took out a notepad from a drawer to make a list. The first item was to try to find Katie's cell phone. After writing that down, he dialed her number again, but once again, he got the same result. He promised himself that he would keep trying her number regularly. The second item on his list was to contact all the neighbors on his block to see if they had heard or seen anything when Katie went missing. While writing, he realized he should also ask them if they noticed anything strange around the time Erin disappeared. Soon, his list grew to 5 things he planned to start right away and continue in the morning. He sat there thinking about his list, taking small sips from his drink, until he realized something he had done might have been a big mistake. He recalled the strange message left on his machine and remembered that the first voice saying "da" sounded familiar. He began to wonder if that might have been Katie. He walked over to the answering machine and pressed play, but nothing happened. That was when he remembered he had pressed the erase button earlier. Panic began to rise as he faced the possibility that he may have lost a clue about Katie's disappearance. He took the tape out of the answering machine and hurried into the living room where the cassette player was. He put the tape in and hoped for the best as he pressed play. He felt relieved when he heard the first messages coming from the speakers. He remembered reading the instructions for his answering machine, which said that messages weren't erased but just rewound and reset. When the tape reached the third message, the one he hoped was from Katie, he listened closely and felt sure it was her voice. The second part of the message had a man's voice he didn't recognize. After that third message ended, Rob stopped the tape and rewound it. He went back to the kitchen with the tape in his hand and a bit of hope in his heart. With the tape in front of him, Rob quickly called the police department using Constable Aikman's card but asked for Detective Maki. When he spoke to the detective, he hurriedly told him about the message. The detective didn't seem as excited as Rob but agreed to come by and pick up the tape soon. Rob felt a rush of optimism. Maybe things wouldn't be as bleak as they seemed. While waiting for Detective Maki, Rob found a spare tape to use in the answering machine. He didn't want to miss any important messages, especially if there might be another one from Katie. He checked his cell phone to make sure the new tape worked in the recorder. Rob felt pleased with his progress as he sat waiting for the detective. His wait was short, and soon he heard a knock at the door. Rob quickly went to the door and opened it for Detective Maki. The detective walked inside and said, "So, you think you have something on the tape for me to hear?" "Yes, I'm sure it's Katie's voice. There is a man's voice, too. Let's go into the living room and I'll play it for you on the stereo," Rob replied. He grabbed the tape from the kitchen table and led the detective into the living room. After putting the tape into the player, Rob fast-forwarded past the first 2 messages and stopped it, telling Detective Maki that the first part was Katie's voice, but he didn't know who the second voice belonged to. Rob pressed play and stood quietly while the brief message played. When it was over, he stopped the tape again. "See, I told you she called. She must be with that man who interrupted the message." "Is there any way we can find out where that call came from?" Rob said excitedly to the detective. "Well, I can't really tell much from that," the detective responded. "I'll have our technical team take a look at it and see if the first voice is different from the second. As for finding out who made the call, we can see what we can do, but don't expect too much," Detective Maki said. Rob felt disappointed by the detective's lack of enthusiasm. "Oh," he said, "I thought you could recognize a girl's voice. I know it's Katie on the phone. Can you check if the call came from her cell phone? I haven't seen her phone here, so I believe she has it with her." Rob played the tape again, but Detective Maki remained uninterested after hearing it for the second time. Rob handed the tape to the detective, and they both walked to the door. When they got there, Rob reminded, "Please check if it was her cell phone that made the call." Detective Maki promised to look into it and left. Rob walked slowly back to the kitchen and sat down at the table. He noted the time he gave the tape to Detective Maki. From now on, he would keep detailed notes about everything related to Katie's disappearance. He glanced at his watch and saw it was only 8:45. He thought he might still talk to a neighbor or two. He knew both couples living next to him. He figured they wouldn't go to bed this early, so he felt safe knocking on their doors. He first visited the neighbors on his east side and knocked. His chat with them was short, as neither had seen or heard anything unusual that morning or during the day. Rob shared some basic details about the situation and asked them to call if they remembered anything else. Next, he visited the neighbors on his west side, who also didn't recall anything unusual. Though they wanted to help, They didn't have any new information. Again, Rob asked them to reach out if they thought of anything else. Feeling a bit discouraged, Rob returned home without any new leads. Once inside, Rob grabbed his notepad and a drink and settled into his recliner. After deciding to take part in the search for Katie and Aaron, he knew he needed a solid plan. He began to think back on everything that had happened at the main police station. He wrote down the questions that Detective Mackey had asked and the agreements made between them. Rob knew he needed to stay in touch with everyone easily, so he spent some time adding phone numbers into his cell phone for quick access. He reminded himself to get a spare battery for his phone to ensure he could always use it. He also started designing a new missing persons poster for both Aaron and Katie. He wrote quickly in his notes, taking breaks to think whenever his hand caught up with his thoughts. During these pauses, he would sip his drink and sit back to plan more. Rob kept working until 2 a.m. when he decided it was time to sleep. During those hours of thinking and planning, he made several important decisions that would shape the next part of his life. He put his notes on the table and went to the bathroom to freshen up. After his shower, he went to bed feeling hopeful for the first time since he learned about Katie's disappearance. He climbed under the covers and fell asleep quickly, enjoying a more restful night than he expected. Day 3. He woke up as usual on Wednesday morning and got up quickly, eager to start on his plans from the night before. By 6:45, he was dressed, ready, and holding a fresh cup of coffee. He looked forward to starting his list, with the first task being a visit to the office at 8 a.m. to talk with his boss, Henry Brown. Since both of his cars were being checked by the forensics team, Rob called a taxi to pick him up at 7:30. By 8:05, he was in Mr. Brown's office explaining his situation. He needed to take some time off and wanted to use his vacation days during this time. Rob said he was willing to help prepare someone else for his role and would be available if needed. He ended his talk by saying, "I really don't have a choice. I can't work while my daughter and wife are missing. I intend to spend all the time I need to look for them. If we can't find a solution, I will have to resign." Rob's manager understood he couldn't make this decision alone, so he asked for some time to discuss it with the other managers. Rob agreed to give them time, allowing him to start on the important tasks he needed to do. While he waited to find out what would happen with his job, whether he would be taking a break or losing it entirely, he had some things he planned to do. As the taxi left the parking lot, he thought about whether he would return there. At this stage in his life, he should have cared about his job, but without Aaron and Katie, it didn't matter much to him. As the place where he had worked for the past 8 years disappeared from view, he focused on the first task on his list for the day. His next stop was the Duluth police station. He wanted to speak with Detective Mackey and figured it was best to see him early. When he entered the office on the 3rd floor, he spotted Detective Mackey at his desk. He walked over and said, "Detective Mackey, I need to talk to you." Detective Mackey looked up, clearly surprised. "Mr. Walsh, it's early for you to be here. What can I do for you?" Rob took a seat next to the detective. "I wanted to check on what you found out about the voicemail on my answering machine. Have you heard anything about my daughter's cell phone yet? I think you just need to get that information from the phone company." "Well, we haven't received a report from the phone company just yet. It's been requested, and they will send it over as soon as it's ready. The tape we got will be reviewed today, but it won't be ready before noon." "What about my car? When can I pick it up?" Rob was eager to get moving with his plans. He needed a vehicle today, and if his car was ready, he would have to rent one instead. Detective Mackey picked up the phone and made a call. After a moment, he asked, "How's it going with the Walsh cars?" He listened for a bit before saying, "Okay, I'll send him down in half an hour to pick up the one you finished with." Turning to Rob, the detective said, "You heard that. One of your vehicles will be ready in about half an hour. The other should be done around noon. I trust they didn't find anything unusual with the cars. If they did, I'd like to know right away. I don't want to slow down your efforts to find my wife and daughter. I'll be hanging up posters around the area, so here's my cell phone number in case you need to reach me," Rob said. "Before you go, Mr. Walsh, I would need a DNA sample and your fingerprints for our records," Detective Mackey added. "The technicians took some fingerprints from your home and would like to clear your prints from those they found. They also asked if you could bring something that has your wife's and daughter's DNA on it, like a toothbrush or a hairbrush. They didn't take their toothbrushes when they left, but I will bring both of them this afternoon. Just let me know where I should go to give you my fingerprints and DNA. Rob stood up and was told to go to the first floor and find the door labeled Laboratory. Mackie accompanied Rob to the lab for his DNA sample and then took him to another room for fingerprinting. After he completed both tasks, Rob was sent to the main floor to get his car. He was informed that they would return Aaron's car to his house later in the day. As he drove away, Rob noticed Mackie standing by the building looking thoughtful. Rob then drove home. He had a few things to do and was eager to get started. Once inside his house, he went directly to his computer to finish designing the posters he planned to put up around the area. It took him about an hour to scan the photos and write the information for the posters. Along with descriptions, he included contact details for the Duluth Police, the Minnesota State Police, and his own phone numbers. After finishing, he printed a few copies to take to the printing shop. Once Rob was done with the posters, he took out Officer Aikman's card and called the number written on the back. He wanted to speak to Aikman's sister-in-law, Dr. Gloria Baker, as soon as possible. He learned that the psychologist worked from home and was able to set up an appointment to see her first thing in the morning. After that call, he reached out to Aikman's personal number and left a message for her to call him on his cell. He was eager to see if her offer to help was real. Having finished these calls, he realized he still had time to take the posters to the printers, so he headed to the print shop. His order for 1,000 copies would be ready the next day since he chose to pay extra for fast service. By the time he returned home, it was noon, and he stopped to pick up a burger and fries from a local restaurant. He had just finished his lunch when Officer Aikman called him back. After she introduced herself, he said, "Hello, Officer Aikman. I wanted to ask what you have heard about my missing daughter. I am curious about what's going on because, according to Detective Mackie this morning, nothing has been found yet." Officer Aikman responded, "During the morning meeting for the day shift, Detective Mackie shared details about your daughter's disappearance and your wife's situation. He mentioned that, although there is no evidence right now, he considers you, as the husband and father, a main suspect. I'm sure you understand that already, so I'm not revealing anything new. Yes, I had a feeling about that. I spoke to him earlier today. While he didn't directly say that he suspected me, he did insist on taking my fingerprints and DNA. I'm also taking my wife's and daughter's DNA samples to him this afternoon. I also wanted to mention that I've set up a meeting with your sister-in-law for tomorrow morning. I hope she can help me understand what might have happened," Rob said. "I believe she can assist you. I've heard from others who have talked to her, and they said she helped them," Officer Aikman replied. After saying goodbye, Rob picked up a couple of plastic sandwich bags and went to the bathroom. He carefully placed Aaron's and Katie's toothbrushes in separate bags and labeled them. Before heading to the police station, he called Henry Brown to check on his job situation. He was glad to hear that they would allow him to take the time off he requested, but he needed to come in to sign some papers. Rob planned to do that later in the afternoon. As he drove back to the police station with the toothbrushes, Rob felt content with how things were unfolding. He was crossing off items on his list, and nothing had caused any trouble yet. He hoped this would continue. After handing in the toothbrushes at the police lab, Rob went upstairs to see Detective Mackie again. He didn't know if Mackie would be there, but when he entered the office, he saw him talking on the phone. Mackie noticed Rob and waved him over. Once he got off the call, Mackie said, "We received a report from your cell phone provider. It was your daughter's phone that made a short call to you last night, and it was traced back to Grand Marais. Do you or your family know anyone there?" "I can't think of anyone we know in Grand Marais," Rob replied. "Whoever took Katie must have taken her there. Have you contacted the police in that area? Are they searching for her?" Rob felt a surge of hope from the information the detective shared. This was the closest they had gotten to finding her since she went missing. "We have alerted the local authorities and they will be watching for her. We don't have much to share, only her physical description. Are you sure that no one you know could have taken her phone and made that call? Was it really just a friend trying to help you?" Detective Mackie was staring directly at Rob, pushing him to reply. Rob stood up, anger clear on his face. "How can you accuse me of having anything to do with my daughter's disappearance? You have no reason to keep throwing those accusations around. If you had any proof, you would have shown it. I didn't give her phone to anyone. I haven't asked anyone to go to Grand Marais for me. You need to believe me and understand that I had nothing to do with the disappearance of my daughter or my wife. Well, Mr. Walsh, it seems a bit too easy that you received a mysterious call from her phone. My team says it's hard to tell if more than one person was involved or just one person changing their voice. The sound isn't clear enough for them to know. They pointed out that the first word might come from a different person than the second, but it might also be one person pretending to be someone else. It looks to me like you are not taking this situation seriously. You seem more interested in blaming me than in finding my family. It would make your job easier if you could convince everyone that I am guilty. Rob sat back down but kept glaring at Detective Mackey. You should try seeing it from my perspective, Mr. Walsh. Your story doesn't make much sense. I've talked with the State Police Crime Lab, and they agree with my doubts. Your explanation about your wife and daughter disappearing with packed bags doesn't support the idea of a stranger taking them. They believe you are the most likely reason for their disappearance. You might not like it, but those are the facts. Rob thought about what Detective Mackey had just said, feeling a bit calmer. I see how you could think that way, but I did not cause this. Can you arrange for a test with a specialist? I'm willing to do anything to prove you are wrong. We don't usually do those tests here. We've heard many stories about people who manipulate their results, or that they just lead to unclear outcomes. We will think about whether something like that is appropriate as the investigation goes on. For now, you can go since we are still checking the details of your story, but don't be surprised if we want to speak with you again. With that, Detective Mackey turned away from Rob and returned to his papers, signaling that the conversation was over. Rob stood up and left the police station. He believed the information about Katie's phone being used in Grand Marais was important, and he was determined to follow up on it, even if the police did not take it seriously. He decided to go to Grand Marais himself to see if he could find her there. He drove straight home to pack an overnight bag with what he would need for the trip. As he drove, he thought about what he needed to do before he left, so that by the time he reached home, he had a clear list in his mind. As he walked up the path to his front door, he called Henry Brown. When Henry answered, Rob said, "Hello, Henry, this is Rob. I need to go out of town for a few days, so can we move our meeting to the 1st of next week? Maybe Monday afternoon?" After Henry agreed, Rob continued, "Thanks, Henry. There's news that Katie might be in Grand Marais, so I'm going there to search for her myself. Bye for now." As he packed his clothes for the trip, he called Dr. Baker to cancel his appointment with the psychologist he was supposed to meet the next morning. Once that was done, he called a printing company to arrange for some posters to be sent to him in Grand Marais. His last call was to his neighbor, Herman McLean, asking if he could watch over Rob's home for the next few days and collect his mail and newspapers. In less than 20 minutes, Rob had packed his toiletries and clothes into a gym bag and was at the front door, locking it. Moments later, he drove away from the curb, already thinking about what he would do when he arrived in Grand Marais that afternoon. The drive from Duluth to Grand Marais took Rob just over 2 hours. The whole way, he was looking at the passing cars, hoping to spot anyone who looked like Katie. Once, when he drove through 2 harbors, his heart raced when he thought he saw her walking along the sidewalk. As he got closer, he realized the person was much older and did not look like her at all. This made him feel disappointed. When he arrived in Grand Marais, he found a room in a motel located in the center of town. After checking in, he decided to explore the nearby streets to see if he could catch a glimpse of Katie. He spent about an hour looking, but soon realized that finding her would take a lot of luck. Accepting this, he headed back to the motel to get a map of the area and figure out his next steps. He realized that his feelings were getting the best of him, and he knew he needed a smarter plan. At the motel office, he asked for maps of the area and found out that the Department of Natural Resources had the best ones, but they were already closed for the day. He made a note to check there in the morning. For now, he took a small tourist map of Grand Marais. He had printed one of the sample posters at home, so he decided to take it around to a few businesses that were still open. He needed to find something to eat, too, so walking around the downtown area would help him look for her, show her picture, and find a restaurant. He spent the next hour approaching the few people he saw and talking to employees at the businesses that were still open. Sadly, no one recognized Katie or Aaron. By 7:30, he was really getting hungry, so he chose to try Sven and Ole's pizzeria. First, he went to the cashier and asked the young girl at the register if she had seen Katie or Aaron. Once again, he was met with a shake of the head, so he took a seat at a table by the window. He ordered 2 slices of pizza and a beer, using the wait time to update his notes for the next day's tasks. He had left his missing persons poster on the table in front of him. When the waitress brought his order, he picked it up so she could set his plate down. As she turned to leave, she glanced at the poster in his hand. She said, "I think I saw that girl recently. Can I take a closer look at this picture?" Rob's heart raced at her words, and he quickly handed her the poster, saying, "Please take a good look. She's been missing from Duluth since yesterday. She's my daughter." The waitress looked at the picture for a moment before meeting Rob's eyes. She spoke carefully. "I can't be really sure, but I think I saw her in a car that passed by as I was walking to work yesterday afternoon, right in front of the restaurant. I'm not completely sure, though." Rob felt hopeful and asked, "Did she seem okay? Did you see who was with her? What kind of car was it?" "She looked fine to me, if it is her. I don't know who she was with or the exact kind of car. It might have been brown and not too big, maybe about the size of a Honda Civic. I'm not great with cars, so I can't give you more details." "Do you know which way they were going? What time do you think that was?" Rob hurriedly made notes and looked up at her with anticipation. "The car was headed west on the street just outside the restaurant. I was on my way to work, and it was just before 4 in the afternoon." The waitress gave him back the poster and waited for him to ask anything else. Rob wrote down her information and then noted his phone number and name on a page from his notepad. He asked, "If you remember anything or see her again, could you call me and leave a message if I don't answer?" The waitress promised she would let him know if she thought of anything else and would reach out right away if she spotted Katie again. Rob thanked her earnestly for her help, and as she walked away, he felt a sense of renewed hope. He was sure he would find Katie. After finishing his meal, he continued walking through downtown Grand Marais, showing his poster to everyone he met. Unfortunately, he didn't find anyone else who recognized Katie. By the time he returned to the motel, he was tired from all the walking and felt a bit less hopeful about the waitress's uncertain sighting from earlier. He started to think that she might have just seen someone who looked like Katie but wasn't sure about it. Rob decided he should get an early start in the morning, so he planned to take a shower and go to bed soon. It took him a while to fall asleep because thoughts of Katie and Aaron filled his mind. Before he finally drifted off, he got up twice, turned on the light, and wrote notes to remind himself of things he needed to do the next day. Eventually, he fell into a restless sleep and woke up at his usual time the next morning. Day 4. As soon as Rob got up, he set up the small coffee pot in the motel room. While he shaved and got ready for the day, the coffee brewed. It was hot and ready when he sat down at the small table, where his notes and papers were spread out. As he enjoyed his first cup of coffee, he looked over the tasks ahead of him. By 7:30, he had finished the whole pot and rewritten his notes to include new thoughts he had the night before. Just after 8 o'clock, he finished his breakfast in the small diner connected to the motel and made his first call. He left a message on Officer Aikman's machine, asking her to call him on his cell phone. He explained that he was in Grand Marais trying to find his daughter. His next call was to Detective Maki. After a few minutes, he was connected to the detective, who sounded surprised to hear him. "Detective Maki, I may have some news about my daughter. I met a waitress in a restaurant here in Grand Marais who thinks she saw Katie around 4 p.m. on the day she went missing. She believes Katie was in a brown car, but she didn't know the make and didn't see the driver. I'm going to look for her here until I find her, or there's nowhere else to search," said Rob. "Are you up in Grand Marais looking for her? Why not let the police handle it?" Detective Maki asked, waiting for Rob's response. "I felt like I had to do something myself. This seemed like the best way forward. I'll be getting some posters printed and putting them up around town. Someone might have seen her." "Good thing you called me this morning. The investigators checked your home but didn't find anything concerning. There were no signs of trouble, and your cars were fine, too. We still have some fingerprints, but it will be hard to match them without your wife's or daughter's prints." Feel free to ask me for anything. You have my cell phone number, so just call any time. If I don't answer, just leave a message, and I'll call you back as soon as I'm able," Rob replied. "Don't worry, I'll reach out if I have any updates or questions," Mackie said. "I'm starting to think you're telling the truth, and maybe your search in Grand Marais isn't a bad idea. The police there are busy and may not have enough people to help find your daughter." Rob thanked the detective for his support and promised to call Duluth at least once a day. After hanging up, he felt more relaxed. He had feared calling Mackie, thinking he might be blamed for his daughter's disappearance. Rob's first stop after leaving the restaurant was a gas station, where he filled his car and showed Katie's picture to the attendant. Then he drove to the Department of Natural Resources office to find maps of the area. He found some excellent maps that showed all the back roads in northeastern Minnesota. He bought a complete set and felt ready to start his search. Before hitting the road, he called the printing office in Duluth to have the posters sent to his motel. He asked them to provide fast service and add the cost to his bill, as he wanted to start handing out the posters as soon as possible. The printers told him that he could expect his posters just after 2 p.m. Since Rob didn't think he would get his posters from Duluth until after lunch, he didn't want to visit businesses he would need to return to later. Instead, he decided to drive around Grand Marais to ask people if they had seen Katie and to look out for any brown cars. His driving took him around every street in Grand Marais, and it took him until just after lunchtime to finish. He stopped and spoke with many people along the way, but none of them recognized Katie. Whenever he saw a brown car, he wrote down the address and the car's license plate number. It was time for lunch, so Rob went to a local cafe. He knew he needed to eat healthy meals, not just fast food, to stay in shape and be healthy. He enjoyed soup and salad, followed by a small slice of homemade pie for dessert. Before leaving the restaurant, he showed his daughter's picture again, but sadly, there were no new leads. He had a little over an hour to wait before the posters arrived, so he used the time to organize his notes and mark the streets he had visited earlier. While he was finishing up his notes, he got a call from Officer Aikman in Duluth. She told him that their morning meeting had focused on Katie's disappearance. Detective Mackie mentioned that Rob was no longer seen as the main suspect in the case. Instead, he was looking for someone else who might have taken Katie and had talked to many of her classmates. The student said that Katie was not the type to miss exams or leave home without a good reason. Rob thanked Officer Aikman for the update and shared what he was doing in Grand Marais. She wished him well and said she would call him the next day with more information from Duluth. By the time he hung up, it was time to go back to the motel to check on his posters. As he parked outside the office, the brown UPS truck was just leaving. When he entered the office, he saw a box on the counter and went straight to it. The clerk recognized him and told him his package had arrived. Rob picked up the box and headed to his car. He was eager to start handing out the posters so anyone who might have seen Katie in Grand Marais would know how to help. His first stop was at the Grand Marais Police Department, where he left enough posters for each officer. After that, he went to the State Police Depot to do the same. The officers Rob spoke with at both places did not know Katie, but he hoped that having one of his posters would help them recognize her or Aaron if they saw either of them. He spent the afternoon visiting different businesses and public offices in Grand Marais, asking for permission to put up a poster on their walls or bulletin boards. In many busy spots, he was allowed to stick a poster on the window. By the end of the day, he had put up over 100 posters, but none of the people he talked to had seen anything helpful. That evening, Rob was having a quiet dinner when his phone rang. It was the first of 4 calls he received that night from people claiming they had just seen Katie while traveling in the Grand Marais area. Each call took several minutes as he had to confirm to himself that these people were misinformed. 3 of the callers mentioned that the girl they had seen did not have the blonde streak in her hair, and the 4th described a girl who was much younger than Katie. The first call excited Rob and gave him hope, which quickly faded. With each new call, he tried to manage his excitement, but each one left him feeling down as he hung up. He wished this wouldn't happen every day and hoped to get a call that would lead him to something real, something he could share with the police. The first call interrupted his meal, forcing him to finish the cold food on his plate. The second and third calls pulled him away from his work in his motel room as he prepared his notes for that day and planned for the next. The last call came just as he was about to fall asleep that night. making him wonder how many more calls would be as unhelpful. Day 5. On Friday morning, Rob woke up to the sound of heavy rain. He hadn't checked the weather the night before, so he turned on the TV to see the forecast. He was disappointed to find that rain was expected all day, with some really heavy showers. He had planned to explore some country roads, but the rain would make that hard. He knew he would need to change his plans for the day. He had an early breakfast and made a new list of things to do. By 8:30, he was back in his room calling Detective Mackey. When the detective answered, Rob said, "Hello, Detective Mackey, it's Rob Walsh. I have a list of car license plates and addresses I've gathered here in Grand Marais, and I'm hoping you could look into them to see if any of these people might be possible suspects. All of the cars are brown, and there are 10 of them. I hope it's not too much to check." Detective Mackey paused for a moment before responding. "Could you send that to me by fax? If I start writing down a lot of numbers and addresses, I might make a mistake. It's easier for me to check a license plate number, and I can compare the address you give me with what I find. This way, we can see if any of the car owners have a criminal record. You might also want to reach out to the police in Grand Marais. They know the area well." "That's a good idea. I'll take this list to the motel office and fax it to you. Have you gotten any calls from my posters? I've had 4 calls in Grand Marais, but none were helpful. Each time the person mistook someone else for Katie. No one has called the Duluth police about seeing her there. We've received a few calls from the notices on TV and radio, but they did not lead anywhere. One seemed promising enough that we sent a team to check, but it turned out to be nothing. The state police would let us know if they received any reports, and so far they haven't. We will keep you updated if we receive anything useful," Detective Mackey said. Rob thanked the detective and ended the call, relieved that Detective Mackey did not hint that he had anything to do with his daughter's disappearance. This felt like a small victory, and he hoped it meant Detective Mackey was no longer suspicious of him. Rob took his list of numbers and addresses to the motel office and faxed it to Detective Mackey using the number on Officer Aikman's card. After returning to his room, Rob called Officer Aikman's answering machine and left her a message asking her not to call him unless there was important information that he hadn't already heard. He realized it was unfair to expect the officer to update him on every detail of the investigation. He appreciated her kindness in believing he was being honest about what had happened. He decided not to keep pressing her for updates and to wait until he truly needed her help. For the next hour, Rob called family and friends to let them know what he had been doing since Katie went missing. No one had heard from her, and none of them could offer further advice on how to handle the situation. After Rob finished his last phone call, he promised himself to stay in touch with everyone. They all seemed just as worried about the situation as he was. Several people asked if he needed any help, and some family members even offered to support the search costs. He thanked them and arranged for his brother-in-law, Jim Randall, who lived in Duluth, to pick up the remaining posters from the printer. Rob also asked Jim to help put up posters in Duluth, focusing on busy places like gas stations, restaurants, and shopping malls. He hoped that if Jim could cover Duluth, he would also reach out to nearby areas. After his phone calls were done, Rob drove to the Grand Marais Police Department to share a list of brown cars he had found. Most of the addresses were familiar to the officer at the desk, and he used a city directory to find the car owners. None of them were known to the police for any past issues, but the officer promised Rob that they would try to see if any of these individuals were connected to Katie's disappearance. That was all Rob could really ask for. When Rob finished at the police department, he headed to the state police office to check for any updates since his visit the day before. Sadly, there was no new information. It was now mid-morning, and the rain had become stronger. With the bad weather keeping everyone indoors, Rob felt it was best to pause his search until it improved. He returned to his motel room to work on his list of tasks and people to contact. By mid-afternoon, the rain had lightened up, so Rob set out again to post his flyers. Having already covered Grand Marais, he decided to drive north along the highway toward the Canadian border. There were only a few spots where he could put up posters, but by the end of the day, he reached the border with all the places agreeing to display his flyers. On his way back to Grand Marais, he remembered he hadn't stopped at Grand Portage. He turned off the highway and drove through the village. He found a store and a marina that were still open, and he was able to post his signs there. Just before getting back on the highway, he noticed the Grand Portage Casino and decided to see if he could place his posters there, too. At the hotel desk in the casino, he was allowed to put up a poster on the wall beside the check-in area. He headed to the restaurant and was allowed to put up a poster on the wall behind the cash register. When he entered the casino area, he noticed it was a busy place that could give his posters great visibility if he could display them. He went to the security desk to see if he could talk to a manager. It wasn't long before the manager arrived, and he got permission to place 2 of his posters, one outside the bingo hall and another on the wall beside the rewards booth. While he was putting up the second poster, Rob received an unexpected but welcome response. Just as he was finishing up, he heard someone ask, "Are you the one looking for the woman on that poster?" Rob turned to see a dark-haired security guard looking at his poster. "Yes, I am. She's my wife, and she's been missing since March from our home in Duluth. Do you recognize her?" He saw her name tag read Abby Lapine. Abby stepped closer to examine the poster and said, "I think I might. It's been a while, but she reminds me of a woman I talked to here a few months ago. She was at a slot machine and seemed unwell. I asked if she was okay, but the man behind her said she was fine. She didn't answer me, and something felt off about her." Rob felt a wave of hope from what she had said and asked, "Are you sure it was her? Do you know if it was in early March? She disappeared on March 4th. Can you remember anything about the man with her, Miss Lapine?" Abby continued to look at the poster and replied, "I can't be certain, but the woman did look a lot like her. I can't recall exactly when, but it might have been that long ago. I didn't see the man's face, just a side view. He might have been shorter than you, and I think he had black hair. I'm not sure if that helps." Rob was excited about what Abby was sharing. Noticing the cameras around the casino, he asked, "Could the casino have security footage from that time? Would it be kept somewhere?" She used her microphone to call for a supervisor to join her at the rewards booth. In about 5 minutes, Rob and Abby were approached by a well-dressed man with a walkie-talkie. Rob asked him, "Is it possible you have security videos from early March? Miss Lapine thinks she might have recognized my wife from this poster I've just put up. If there's any video from the cameras, I would like to see it to check if my wife was here. She has been missing since March 4th. The man moved closer to look at Rob's poster and replied, "I'm afraid we can't help you with that. The videos from the casino are not saved for very long. However, we do keep specific videos of our cashier areas and offices for a longer time. I'm sorry we can't assist you with your request." He looked again at the poster. "They seem like lovely women, your wife and daughter. I hope you find them." Rob realized he probably wouldn't get any more information at the casino, so he asked Miss Lapine if he could give her his name and phone number in case she remembered something or saw the woman again. He knew his number was on the poster, but he wanted her to have a copy in case the poster was taken down. After thanking the helpful security guard, Rob left the casino and headed back to the motel in Grand Marais. While driving back, Rob thought about the surprising things that had happened at the Grand Portage Casino. It felt almost strange that he had found a clue about Aaron while mainly looking for Katie. He hadn't given up on finding his wife. It just felt surprisingly hopeful. One thing was clear. It didn't seem like a coincidence that this was the 3rd event linking his missing family to northern Minnesota. He realized he would need to focus his search here for now. His determination was renewed. He wanted to make some real progress. As he arrived in Grand Marais, the rain stopped and he spotted a big rainbow over Lake Superior. He hoped Aaron and Katie were safe at the end of it. Feeling inspired by the sighting of Aaron, Rob decided to have a nice dinner. After eating, he returned to his room just before 9 o'clock. He spent his evening relaxing in front of the TV with his notepad ready in case he thought of something new. Before going to bed, he checked for any messages on his voicemail and called his home number in Duluth to listen to messages from his answering machine. There were 3 messages, all from close friends asking for updates about his search for Katie. He planned to contact them all tomorrow. For tonight, he just wanted a good night's sleep. Day 6. On Saturday morning, Rob woke up feeling refreshed after a full night's sleep. As he put on his wristwatch, he checked the date and realized it was already the 14th. It was hard to believe that 4 days had gone by since he had last seen his daughter. He felt more hopeful than he had the day before, and was happy to see that the morning was bright and sunny with hardly any clouds. Today he planned to explore some back roads in the Grand Marais area. Most of these roads were gravel and would have been hard to drive on after the rain the day before. It was after 9 a.m. when he finally started his journey. He had called Detective Mackey to share the possible sighting of Aaron at the Grand Portage Casino. Sadly, the detective was not as excited as Rob. He mentioned that the sighting was not confirmed. He explained that he didn't want Rob to get his hopes up too much, as eyewitness accounts could be unreliable, and courts were starting to value them less than before. Detective Mackey helped tone down Rob's excitement, but he still felt more hopeful than he had the day before. He set out with his maps, choosing to drive on the better county roads before heading on to the smaller dirt roads. He packed a sandwich and a couple of bottles of Coke for lunch and drove nearly 100 miles before stopping for a break. During his long drive, he found few people to show his poster to, and only a couple of businesses where he could leave a copy. The afternoon was much the same, driving along winding roads with no luck finding any brown cars or anyone who looked like Aaron or Katie. By the end of the day, his gas tank was running low and his spirits were down as well. He returned to Grand Marais feeling hungry, tired, and as if his day had been a waste. Where he had enjoyed a nice dinner the night before, his Saturday night meal was just pizza and a draft beer. He was more interested in resting and thinking about his search than in having a pleasant meal. By the time he reached his room, he was ready for bed. It took all his effort to take a hot shower before turning in. As he tried to sleep, he spent hours tossing and turning, wondering if he would ever bring his family back together. Day 7. The next morning, Sunday, was as bright and clear as the last. The nice weather boosted Rob's energy, and he left before 9 o'clock with his maps laid out and a smile on his face. This day, he focused on the side roads heading north from Grand Marais to the Canadian border. There were very few roads and even fewer homes along the way. Again, he did not find any brown cars and could only show his poster to a few people. However, he found a tourist shop that agreed to display one of his posters. It was another long day for Rob, and he felt he had covered the area north of Grand Marais well. When he got back to Grand Marais at 7 p.m., he had marked all the roads on his maps for the area as complete from his drives over the weekend. As soon as he entered his room, he checked his voicemail and answering machine in Duluth. The only messages were from a few friends and family. There were no updates about his missing family members. Since he felt he had done a good job covering the area, he decided to drive back to Duluth in the morning. He wanted to meet Detective Mackey in person to discuss what to do next. He also was low on clean clothes and needed to either buy more or return home to do laundry. Grand Marais was close enough to Duluth that he could get back quickly if needed. It was just a 2-hour drive, and since he had already met with local police officers, he believed he could count on them to help if necessary. Day 8. On Monday morning, he started his day early and was packed and checked out by 8 o'clock. He decided to grab a quick breakfast before hitting the road, and by 9, he was already 20 miles south of Grand Marais. The drive back to Duluth was quiet, but he noticed many roads branching off the main highway and several small towns along the way. He thought he would have to return soon to explore those places, even though he wasn't looking forward to more hours of driving. The past few days had been exhausting. Once Rob got home, he asked his neighbor, Herman McLean, to collect his mail and newspapers from the week before. He hoped to find a card or letter from Katie explaining her disappearance, but deep down, he knew she hadn't left by choice. That would be too easy, and wouldn't explain Aaron's disappearance either. Rob quickly skimmed through the newspapers for mentions of Aaron or Katie and saw several articles by a local court reporter. She seemed interested in their case, and Rob thought it might be a good idea to reach out to her. He believed that by sharing more details, she could help keep the story in the news. Rob worried that the media would lose interest if nothing new happened. He was determined to prevent that. Just before noon, Rob called Henry Brown to see if they could meet at the office to discuss his time away from work. He was informed that he could come in any time during the afternoon, so he set a meeting for 1 p.m. Rob felt it was important to take care of things so he wouldn't have to think about work for a while. His next call was to Dr. Gloria Baker, the psychologist. He was able to get an appointment for 3 p.m. because she had a cancellation. After that, he called Detective Maki, but there was no new information to share. Rob's last call was to Jim Randall. He had been putting up posters around Duluth and Superior, Wisconsin. Jim finished this job late on Sunday night and was taking a day off to relax after a busy weekend. Rob thanked him for his help and apologized for making him miss work. Jim told Rob it was important for him to help his sister and niece, and he offered to assist Rob more whenever he could. When Rob finished his phone calls, he had to leave for the office to meet with Henry Brown. His boss explained that the first 3 weeks off would count as vacation time, while the following weeks would be unpaid leave. Rob signed the necessary forms and collected his vacation pay. Rob was grateful for his boss's help and promised to be back as soon as he could. He learned that another programmer was continuing the project he started and that Rob's notes were enough for them to go on. This made Rob feel relieved since he wouldn't have to come in to guide someone else. With over an hour to spare before his appointment with Dr. Baker, Rob decided to visit the police station to see how the technicians were doing with the analysis of what they found at his home. He knew they might not give him direct updates, but he headed to Detective Maki's desk on the 3rd floor. When he arrived, he saw the detective working hard, so he sat down next to him. When the detective looked up and saw Rob, he stopped working and said, "Mr. Walsh, it's nice to see you again. Your trip along the North Shore has brought attention to your wife's and daughter's pictures. We've had 3 calls in just a few minutes, which is good news. However, none of these seem to be very helpful. They mostly sound like, 'I thought I saw her in the grocery store line.' Even if these sightings are true, they don't give us much useful information besides suggesting they might be in that area. Your phone call and the 2 reliable sightings already confirm that." Rob asked about the search for evidence in his home and cars. He wanted to know if anything had been found to help explain what happened to Katie and Aaron. "Nothing at all, I'm afraid. It would be helpful if we could get fingerprints for Aaron and Katie so that we can rule out theirs from those found in your house." Rob thought about what the detective had said and replied, "If I can find things that I know they have touched, would that help?" "That could help a lot. If you can be sure they have touched the items, we should be able to get their prints. We will want items that could give us prints from both hands. Without a reference, we cannot tell which fingers made which prints." Rob promised to see what he could do about getting items with Aaron's and Katie's fingerprints and said he would bring them in for the technicians as soon as possible. Rob and Detective Maki parted on friendly terms, and as Rob left the building, he felt that the detective no longer doubted Rob's intentions regarding his family's disappearance. As he drove to the address that Dr. Baker had given him, Rob was already thinking about which items he could choose that would likely have Aaron's and Katie's fingerprints. By the time he arrived at her office, he had decided on the best ones. He made a note in his mind and planned to get them when he returned home after this visit. Dr. Gloria Baker did not resemble the psychologist Rob had imagined. She was much younger, probably no more than 30, which made him question if she had the experience to give him good advice. Her youthful appearance and short blonde hair were the opposite of what he had expected. He had pictured an older, scholarly figure with glasses, realizing that stereotypes often fall short. The first appointment did not focus much on giving advice. Instead, Rob spent the entire time explaining what had happened over the past 4 months. He shared everything he could about the disappearance of his wife and daughter. Her only questions were about his feelings during those times and what he had done since. The hour went by quickly, and as he walked to the door, her only advice was to be as strong as he could for his family. She pointed out that no matter how upset he was, his wife and daughter would be much more affected. They were the ones separated from everything they knew and felt comfortable with. While he was driving home, Rob couldn't shake off the worry about how scared and anxious Aaron and Katie must be feeling. This thought weighed heavily on him, making him feel guilty for being able to come and go freely. When Rob arrived home, he quickly started gathering things that could be used to get Aaron's and Katie's fingerprints. He decided to take 2 of Katie's favorite CDs in their cases. For Aaron, he chose a decorative plate that he had seen her hang on the wall. He carefully picked up these items while wearing rubber gloves and placed them in plastic bags. After securing everything in a box, he headed to the police station to give the items to the investigators, arriving just before they closed for the day. Once he delivered the items, Rob went upstairs to check if Detective Mackey was still at his desk. The detective was busy working, so Rob went in to talk to him. Mackey seemed surprised to see Rob again and asked why he had returned so soon. "I wanted to let you know I brought some items that might have my wife's and daughter's fingerprints. I left them downstairs with the team. Could you call me when you find out if they have enough samples? If not, I can find more." Detective Mackey replied, "With all the effort you're putting in, we might have to hire you." He chuckled and added, "Seriously, as you search for your wife and daughter, you could run into the person who has them. That could be risky since you might be unprepared. You should think about taking a self-defense class and apply for a permit. If you pass the background check, it would be legal in Minnesota now. It's part of the right to carry law." Rob considered this idea for a moment and replied, "How long would this take? I don't want to spend too much time on it if it gets in the way of my search." Mackey rummaged through his desk and pulled out a piece of paper. After reading it, he told Rob, "There's a class this week from 8 to 10 p.m. Wednesday to Friday. It includes a test on Saturday morning, and if you pass, it will take about a week for the background check. If all goes well, you could have your permit by the end of next week." Rob thought for a moment and asked, "Where do I sign up for this class? Do you think there might be any issues with me getting a permit?" "As long as you use basic common sense, you shouldn't have any problems," Mackey assured him. "The classes are led by one of our officers in a meeting room at the Edgewater Motel and at a training center downtown. There's a number you can call to add your name to the list if you're interested." He handed Rob the paper he had been looking at. Rob thanked him for the information and called the number on his cell phone. In 5 minutes, he was on the list for the Wednesday night class and learned which room it would be in. Before leaving, Rob asked Detective Mackey, "Have you gotten any responses from the posters I've put up? I haven't received any calls." "Nothing important. We had 2 calls this afternoon, but they didn't help. Both calls were from the west end of Duluth. We sent an officer to check one of them, but it turned out to be a mistake. Don't worry, we will take any real leads seriously," Detective Mackey replied. Rob left the police station for the second time that day and went to his brother-in-law's house. He needed to get more posters to keep sharing them the next day. He planned to cover the area between Duluth and Grand Marais, hoping someone might have seen Katie on her way. On the way there, he stopped at a fast food restaurant for a quick meal. He could have a nicer meal when he wasn't as busy. Jim Randall met Rob at the door and gave him a box full of posters. He carried a second box, and together they took them to Rob's car and put them in the back seat. After loading the boxes, the 2 men stood by the car and talked. "I really appreciate your help spreading these posters around Duluth and Superior. You've saved me a lot of time here. If there are more areas to cover this weekend, I would love your help again. I'm going to start covering from here to Grand Marais in the morning," Rob said. "I'd be happy to help you, Rob," Jim replied eagerly. "Erin is my only sister and Katie is my only niece. I just wish I could do more. I'm going to try to cover the northern area completely in the next 2 days. The main area left would be down to perhaps Hinckley in the south, and I wouldn't mind going around 50 miles west on Highway 53. Since there was that one phone call from Grand Marais made using Katie's phone, I really want to focus on that area. I have no real reason to think they are together, but the way their disappearances are linked does make me think about it," Rob explained. The 2 men shook hands, and Rob got into his car and drove back home. He had spent a lot of time thinking about how to continue his search. It made sense to believe that if he was right, and Erin and Katie were together, they likely headed north along Highway 61 towards Grand Marais. Because of this, he planned to stay close to Highway 61 while putting up his posters. If he was lucky and started early, he might be able to cover the whole stretch of highway in one day. When he got home, Rob did some laundry and tidied up a bit. He decided to go to bed early to begin his journey by 6 a.m. His plan was to drive up to Grand Marais and then return toward Duluth. He expected to arrive just after 8 o'clock when most businesses would be open. This would help him make the best use of his time. Wednesday would be busy since he had a meeting with Dr. Baker scheduled for 1 p.m., and that evening would be his first training class. He intended to use Wednesday morning to finish any routes to the north he couldn't complete on Tuesday. Rob went to bed by 9 p.m. and set the alarm for 5 a.m., hoping to leave by 6. He felt he had achieved a lot that day, and it didn't take long for him to fall asleep. Like usual, he dreamt of his family and happier times. He felt refreshed when the alarm woke him the next morning. Day 9. He started Tuesday morning in good spirits. The weather was typical for June bright with just a few clouds in the sky. The drive to Grand Marais was smooth, with only a few deer crossing the road as he approached Lutzen. He was able to stop in time and watch the animals jump across the highway. It was easy to see why there were many remains of unfortunate deer along the road. The drive back south to Duluth was tiring but uneventful. No one he spoke with recognized the pictures on his posters, even after visiting every business on the highway. In some towns, he went off the highway a little and stopped at any shops he found. He spoke with about 200 people he met, but no one had any useful information. He covered a lot of Two Harbors before 6 p.m. when he decided to return to Duluth. He would finish his work in the morning. He hadn't received any calls on his cell phone all day, but as he entered Duluth, he got a call from a cashier at the Super America station in Two Harbors. She recognized Katie by the streak in her hair and thought she had seen her about a week before. This news excited Rob because the timing matched the day Katie had disappeared. He turned his car around and headed back to Two Harbors to talk to the girl who called. He had been very tired as he got close to home, but this new possible sighting gave him a burst of energy. In a little more than half an hour, Rob walked into the Super America station. 3 girls were working at the cash register, and he quickly found the one who had called his phone. When she had a moment, she joined Rob to share what she remembered from the past week. "Do you think it could have been Tuesday, June 10th, when you saw her?" Rob asked. "Maybe. Let me check my schedule to see if I was here that day." The girl took her bag from under the counter and looked through it for a moment. She pulled out a piece of paper, studied it, and then turned to Rob. "It was probably Tuesday. I'm sure it was early because she came to pay for a cappuccino, and we were really busy with those in the morning. She was with a guy, but I remember her hair with the streak. My hair is similar, and I was thinking about how mine would look with a streak like that," she said. She glanced at the poster Rob had and added, "It was definitely her. I remember her clearly." Rob felt a rush of excitement and quickly asked, "Was she all right? Did she seem troubled? What about the man? Can you describe him?" The girl thought for a moment and replied, "I don't recall any problem with her. She seemed fine. The guy had his arm around her, but it didn't seem controlling. I don't remember much about him, just that he was maybe slightly shorter than you and had dark hair." "Could it have been black hair? Do you remember anything about his face?" "What about their car?" Rob asked, still eager for more details. "Well, I think it was dark, maybe black. I can't recall his face well. He didn't have any noticeable marks, or I would have remembered that. She was the one buying, so I didn't really look at him. I didn't notice their car either. I can't even say for sure if they had one," she said. Rob looked around the counter and saw a couple of cameras above, watching the entrance and exit of the station. He asked the girl, "Do you know if the cameras record? Would the station have tapes from last week?" "I'm not sure about the tapes. The manager would know about that. We could call him at home and you could ask him," she suggested. "Can you give me the number?" "I'll call him on my cell phone and find out." Rob was nervous as he dialed the manager's number while the cashier read it to him. When he got the manager on the phone, he asked about the security tapes. He felt let down when he learned that they only recorded for 24 hours and there was no footage from a week ago. He thanked the manager and ended the call. Having no more questions for the cashier, Rob thanked her for her help and drove back to Duluth. He was relieved to hear that Katie seemed to be okay, but his thoughts were focused on the man described by the cashier. It sounded like the man with Katie might be the same one who had been seen with Aaron at Grand Portage. It was all very uncertain, but Rob planned to talk to Detective Maki in the morning to see what could be done. He was lost in thought during the drive home. As the clock approached 9 p.m., Rob pulled into a burger restaurant drive-thru and picked up a quick meal. He was too tired to cook again and chose fast food for the second night in a row. Rob decided to go to bed early to get some rest. He spent the first couple of hours worrying about the connections he was piecing together regarding Aaron's and Katie's disappearances. If it really was the same person responsible for both, what did that mean? He tried to think it through. but couldn't understand the reasons behind it. Eventually, he fell into an uneasy sleep, waking up at his usual time the next morning. Day 10. The next morning, as he sipped on his coffee, Rob looked around the kitchen and saw it needed cleaning. He decided he would take care of it this week before it became a bigger job. After making that plan, he got ready to head out and finish putting up posters from Duluth to Two Harbors. There weren't many places to stop on the busier highway, so he chose to take the scenic route there and the main highway back. With his plan in mind, Rob left home just after 8 o'clock. It was June 18th, well into the 4th month since Aaron had disappeared, and the 8th day since Katie went missing. The scenic route to Two Harbors had many places to stop. It took him almost 2 hours to drive the 25 miles, and no one he spoke to along the way had seen either of his missing family members. He stopped to get a coffee for the trip back to Duluth, and by 11 a.m. he was back in the city. Rob felt he had thoroughly covered the area north of Duluth. He could only hope that the reports about Aaron and Katie were accurate and that he was indeed searching in the right direction. His biggest worry was that the sightings were wrong, and he had wasted his time for the past few days. Once he was back in the city, he went straight to the police station, hoping to talk to Detective Maki. As usual, the detective was busy at his desk when Rob walked in. This time, Detective Maki noticed him and waved him over. As Rob sat down, the detective said, "It seems you have been working hard. I've received calls yesterday and today from police up north asking about your posters." "At least someone is seeing them," Rob said. "Actually, I found another important lead because of them. Last night I talked to a cashier at the Super America station in Two Harbors who said she saw Katie on the morning she went missing. She was sure about what she saw, and I believe her. The most interesting part is that her vague description of the man with Katie matches what a security guard in Grand Portage told me. She thought she saw Aaron with a man, too. So you're suggesting that both women might have been taken by the same person?" The detective looked thoughtful after saying this. "It certainly looks that way, but it's still just a guess. If either woman is wrong, I could be off base by believing that," Rob continued. "I also want to know what you think about this idea and what you would do in my position." "It's really tough to give advice in a situation like this," Detective Maki replied. "You have to stick with your theory until you find evidence that says otherwise. It makes sense that since the circumstances of their leaving your home are the same person might be involved." "That's what I think too," Rob said, agreeing. "I'm still going to put up my posters in the areas I haven't reached yet, both south and west of Duluth. I'd hate to waste time if they really were taken north, but I feel I have to. By the way, the technicians managed to get complete sets of fingerprints from your wife and daughter from the items you brought in. They used that to check against the fingerprints they collected from your home and cars. It doesn't look like there were any prints from someone else in your home." Detective Maki looked at Rob after he finished speaking. "I hope this doesn't mean you're starting to suspect me again. It is possible that whoever was there either wore gloves or didn't touch anything at all." Rob felt his frustration starting to grow, and he hoped the detective wouldn't bring up that idea again. "I'm sorry if I gave you that impression," Detective Maki said quickly. "I need to keep an open mind, but I don't really believe that right now. If you were involved, it would mean someone else helped you, someone who would have gone to Grand Marais to make a call using your daughter's phone. There is no proof that this happened. When we spoke to your friends, they all said they believed you had nothing to do with this. They explained they couldn't have gone to Grand Marais for you. Thanks for believing in me. You've been very helpful, and I hope I can support you in finding my wife and daughter," Rob said. He checked his watch and added, "I need to leave for a 1 o'clock meeting. Please call me if you hear anything about my posters. I'll be putting them up further south later today. On your way out, stop by the forensics office downstairs and pick up your things from yesterday. They're done with them now, and if you don't take them, they might get lost. I'm sure your wife and daughter would be upset if you lost their things," Detective Maki suggested. "All right, I'll do that. I just need a quick bite to eat before my meeting." Rob picked up his wife's plate and his daughter's 2 CDs before leaving the building. He still had enough time for lunch before meeting Dr. Baker, so he went to Perkins' restaurant for a healthy meal, which was a nice change from the fast food he had been eating. He arrived at Dr. Baker's office right on time and was quickly shown in. He shared what had happened in the past few days, especially the sighting of his daughter in Two Harbors on the morning she went missing. He mentioned how the cashier described the man with Katie in a way that matched the security guard's description of the man seen with Aaron back in March. He really wanted to believe they were connected, as it gave him hope that he could find them both if the man was found. "Doctor, can you help me understand why someone would take my wife and daughter like this? This part really confuses me. Why would anyone do that?" Rob looked at Dr. Baker, waiting for an answer. Baker wanted to offer Rob some kind of explanation. It's tough to say what someone is thinking in a situation like this. It's possible that this person is trying to hurt you by taking away your loved ones. Or it could be someone who is overly interested in them. Did they ever mention anyone giving them too much attention? Rob thought hard for a moment and replied, "They never mentioned anything like that. I'm sure they would have said something if they noticed a problem or someone acting strangely." Once again, his appointment ended sooner than he expected. He was left with something to think about, trying to picture someone he knew who could have done this. It was the only real option that came up in their conversation, but he just couldn't imagine anyone wanting to harm his wife and daughter. He didn't think he had any real enemies. With some time to spare, Rob decided to get more work done by putting up his posters. He drove up Highway 53 west from Duluth, planning to work his way west for an hour and then turn back. After about 20 miles, he had stopped at every business along the highway. When he returned to Duluth, he felt good about what he had accomplished. He planned to make a nice dinner and found plenty of fresh vegetables for a satisfying meal. He knew he would need to go grocery shopping soon, though, as his supplies were getting low. After enjoying his meal and cleaning the dishes, he decided to tidy up the house. He finished cleaning the kitchen before he had to leave for a class. He arrived at the Edgewater Motel 15 minutes early and found a seat just before it started. The class was simple, and when it ended at 10 p.m., Rob thought that if the next 2 nights were just as easy, he would do well. The only part that might be difficult would be the practical section at the range, since it had been years since he had last shot a gun. He would have to wait until Friday night for that. Rob got home too late to do much else on his list. After checking his voicemail and finding no new messages, he poured himself a small drink and settled down to read the newspaper and watch the TV news. He was relieved once again that there were no strange deaths in the area. Before going to bed, he took out a group of family pictures from the end table beside his chair and looked through them. As he went to the bedroom, he had to wipe tears from his eyes, as looking at the pictures had been a touching experience. Day 11. On Thursday morning after his coffee, he headed out on Highway 53 to the west of Duluth again. This time he spent 4 hours going west before turning around and returning to Duluth, stopping at the businesses on that side of the highway on his way back. Once he got back, he stopped at the supermarket to restock his groceries for the next 2 weeks. By the time he finished, it was time for dinner, so he headed home to make a good meal for the second night in a row. Once again, he followed his routine from the night before, this time cleaning the living room before he needed to leave for his class. He found the course to be quite easy, and when he left at 10 p.m., he felt confident that the written test would be simple for him. He checked the news before going to bed. Day 12. The next morning, before leaving on his poster distribution trip heading south along I-35, he decided to do some laundry and tidy up the laundry room. He was growing tired of going to many businesses, talking to lots of people, and putting up his posters. He hadn't met anyone who had seen his missing family members recently, which made him feel like he was wasting his time going west and south. He thought it would be better to head back north to the Grand Marais area, where he felt a glimmer of hope. He promised himself to return there as soon as he could. There were still many towns and important intersections to cover along the highway, and he chose to stay close to I-35. He thought that if he went too far off the highway, it would take too long to put up the posters. He knew he had limits on what he could achieve this way, and he reached those limits. By early afternoon, he had made it to Hinckley and, according to his list, had covered most of the intersections with businesses. After visiting the places nearest to the highway at the Hinckley exit, he began his trip back towards Duluth, stopping at the intersections and businesses he had not seen on his way south. By the time he got home, he was very tired. Dinner was simple, and he decided to relax for the rest of the evening. When it was time to leave for the 8 o'clock class, he felt much better, more rested and alert. He arrived at the range with time to spare. The practical part of his course was also quite easy. By 10 o'clock, he felt confident using a handgun and was sure he would pass the course. He returned home feeling accomplished and decided to unwind with a drink while reading the paper. Since he didn't need to start early the next day after distributing his posters in the important areas, he poured himself another drink and leaned back to think about everything that had happened during the week. Saturday morning started for Rob at the usual time of 6:30 a.m. He didn't need to be at the Edgewater Motel for his written exam, the final part of the course, until 10. He could relax with his coffee, have a good breakfast, and continue thinking about his actions from the past week. He decided to spend the rest of the day doing house chores and maybe reaching out to some neighbors to ask if they had seen anything the morning Katie went missing. Before heading to his exam at the Edgewater Motel, he read the morning paper. No news was good news, as there were no reports of any unidentified female bodies. He was pleased to find a big article on the second page about both Aaron and Katie's disappearances. It was comforting to know that the media still cared about the cases. Rob arrived on time for his exam and finished it, getting home by noon. He felt confident he had passed and that his application for a carry permit would be approved. He planned to tell Detective Maki on Monday that his application was in process, hoping the detective could help speed things up. With some free time, Rob decided to make himself a small steak and baked potato for lunch on the barbecue in his patio. It hadn't been used in weeks, so it was nice to cook outside. Before grilling the steak, he prepared a small salad, trying again to eat healthier. By 1:30, he had enjoyed his meal and cleaned the dishes. A few more rooms in the house still needed attention, so he decided to clean those before starting anything new. He spent about 30 minutes cleaning the bathroom using spray cleaners to tidy up the shower, sink, and toilet, and a glass cleaner for the mirror. The difference was clear when he finished. Next, he moved to his bedroom, where he made things better by simply putting clothes back in their places. A quick vacuuming completed the task, and again, he could see a big change. Feeling satisfied, he headed to Katie's room to finish cleaning. He had saved this room for last because he found it hard to go in. The thought of Katie missing weighed on him, and he expected to see her every time he entered. First, he straightened her bed and put her books and school things away. They had been left on the bed since she had disappeared. Organizing her items made him uneasy, as if he were acknowledging her absence. Once he tidied everything up, he brought in the vacuum cleaner and started cleaning. When he moved the vacuum under Katie's bed, he noticed the sound change slightly, signaling something was caught in it. He pulled it out and found a wad of paper stuck inside. Worried it might be something important for Katie, he tucked it into his shirt pocket and continued cleaning. When he was done, Rob returned the vacuum cleaner and supplies to the laundry room where they usually stayed. He thought it was getting late to start asking his neighbors if they had seen anything strange on the day Katie disappeared. He decided to wait until after dinner, or maybe the next Sunday. That would be a good time to catch people at home. For now, he took a moment to relax. He understood how housework could wear Aaron or Katie out. As he sat in his chair with the TV news quietly playing, he remembered the crumpled paper he found in Katie's room. Curious, he pulled it out of his pocket and unfolded it. At first, he thought it was just a bill for something Katie had bought, and he almost tossed it away. Instead, he opened it fully and saw that it was a grocery store receipt, with familiar codes beside each price. The top of the receipt had the store name, The Falls Grocery. Rob didn't know that store and wondered why it was in Katie's room. He thought about the possibility that this receipt might have been dropped by someone who had taken Katie. He placed the receipt on the table next to him. If it belonged to her abductor, it could have fingerprints on it. Rob felt upset with himself, realizing he might have touched it too much. He quickly went to the kitchen to grab a large, new plastic bag for the receipt. When he returned with the bag, he also brought a pair of tweezers to carefully lift the paper. It was easy to put the receipt in the bag, and once it was there, he smoothed it out for a better look. The receipt was about 10 inches long, showing a total of $38.49, and it seemed to have been paid for in cash. Rob knew this wasn't a receipt from anyone in his family since they did all their grocery shopping at the same store. He had never heard of the Falls Grocery. Curious, he wanted to find out where it was because it didn't seem familiar in Duluth. A quick check in the Duluth phone book showed that there was no place by that name. He felt a spark of excitement, a feeling he hadn't had in a couple of days. Rob decided to look for a Minnesota map to help him figure out where the grocery store might be. After searching briefly, he found he didn't have a Minnesota map at home, so he used his computer to search for one online. It wasn't long before he found a large map and a list of place names in the state. A look at the place names showed 12 locations that had the word Falls in their names. Now, he just needed to figure out where each place was in the state. One of these places should be the home of the man who took Katie. Cannon Falls was too far south, sitting between Faribault and Red Wing. Fergus Falls was far to the west of Hinckley, almost in North Dakota. International Falls was on the northern border of the state, but was much to the west of Grand Portage. Little Falls was close to the center of the state, south of Brainerd. Lake Falls was in the southeast near Red Wing. Big Falls was in the northwest, not far from International Falls. Redwood Falls was in the southwest near Mankato. Granite Falls was west of Minneapolis near the North Dakota border. Taylor's Falls was northeast of Minneapolis by the Wisconsin border. Thief River Falls was in the northwest corner of the state. Zumbro Falls was in the southeast near the Mississippi River. Hanley Falls was in the southwest corner of the state. It seemed clear that none of these places were good options since none were close to HWI. 61, the road that Aaron and Katie likely used. Rob was left thinking about what this meant. As he remembered the receipt, he thought about the lack of falls places nearby. He recalled seeing at least one falls along the north shore. He decided to check the map again and found two places marked, Gooseberry Falls and Caribou Falls. Even though he didn't remember a store called the Falls Grocery when he drove between Duluth and Grand Marais, he planned to leave in the morning to search for this store. If he couldn't find it, perhaps someone else could help him. He realized he needed to give the receipt to the police for them to check, so he made several copies for himself first. Luckily, his printer could make copies, so he did that and called the police station to see if someone was there to take the original receipt. There was someone available, so Rob drove straight to the police station. With his copies in hand, he felt free to give them the original while still being able to look for the store that had issued the receipt. By the time Rob finished all of this, it was already after 7 p.m. and he had not eaten dinner. He was quite hungry, so he decided to make a quick meal. By the time he finished eating, it was after 8 o'clock. Finding the receipt and getting it to the police had given Rob a boost, and he felt ready to continue his search. He decided he still had time to visit his neighbors, wanting to talk to as many of them as he could before it got dark. With that goal in mind, he left his house and started walking around the block. Most of his neighbors were home, so Rob was able to speak with everyone except one person as he made his way east down the street. None of the people he talked to remembered seeing anything unusual on June 10th when Katie vanished. He made a note of the one neighbor who was away so he could come back to talk to them later. At the end of the block, he crossed to the other side of the street and continued his search back to the west. It was dark by the time he reached the end of that block, and only 2 homes did not have anyone there when he knocked. Again, nobody he spoke with remembered anything out of the ordinary on the day Katie disappeared. When he got home, he decided it was time for bed since he planned to leave early the next morning to drive up as far as Grand Portage and then work his way back to Duluth, searching for the Falls Grocery. Feeling he might have found a useful clue regarding Katie's disappearance helped him sleep well. He had a restful night and woke up at his usual time the next morning. Day 14. Sunday looked to be a bright and sunny day. He enjoyed a hearty breakfast and was on the road by 8 o'clock. He decided to drive to the end of Highway 61, searching for any business named the Falls Grocery. This time he reached the customs office at the border, where he spoke with the customs and immigration officers along with Border Patrol. He hadn't visited this office on his first trip and thought it would be good to ask them. Sadly, none of the officers recognized Aaron or Katie, nor did they know the store mentioned on his receipt. On his way back to Duluth, he stopped again at the store and casino in Grand Portage. No one he spoke with recognized the name of the store. He noticed his missing person posters were still up in the casino, which made him happy. He had seen that some of the other stores had already taken down his original posters on his way north. The trip back to Duluth took longer than expected due to the many stops Rob made to ask about the Falls Grocery. and it was after 3 p.m. by the time he got back. Not one person he talked to on the drive back from Grand Portage recognized the store name or provided any new information about Aaron or Katie. The excitement he had felt when he left Duluth in the morning had faded by the time he returned. His hope that one of the falls along Highway 61 North might have inspired a grocery store name along the way had been completely dashed. It seemed he might have to travel across the whole state checking out different towns that included the word falls in their names. He wasn't looking forward to that. After being back in the house for a little while, Rob decided to clean up and then check in with some neighbors still on his list. He knew it was still early enough that people would likely be home before dinner, so he wanted to visit as many as he could that day. He chose to start with the 3 families who were not home when he visited on Saturday. He found all 3 at home, but their memories of the day that Katie went missing were just like everyone else's he had talked to before. Once he finished speaking with those 3, he crossed the street to start his walk west from his house. It didn't take long to cover that block since everyone was home. With almost an hour left before dinner, he continued his way around the rest of his block. At the 3rd house he visited on the street heading south, he finally found someone who could help. Rob knocked on the door, and when a woman answered, he said, "Hello, I'm Rob Walsh, your neighbor from around the corner. I have a few questions to ask." On Tuesday, June 10th, my daughter Katie went missing. The last time I spoke to her was around 8:30 that morning. Did you notice anything strange in the neighborhood that day? This is a picture of my daughter and my wife, who are both missing. Anything you remember could be very helpful. This was what Rob had said at every door he knocked on before, usually without much luck. So he was surprised when the woman said, "I remember that morning well. I had to drive to Minneapolis to see my sister, and before I left I took my dog for a walk around the block because I didn't want to drive far without giving her some exercise. Anyway, I recognized that girl as soon as you showed me this picture. She came out of a house around the corner with a man just as I was getting to their sidewalk. She was struggling with a suitcase, so I stopped to let her get by." Rob was taken aback that someone had actually seen something that might help him. "Are you sure it was that day? Do you remember who she was with? Anything at all could be really important." The woman looked at Katie's picture again before she said, "Oh yes, it was that day for sure. I remember thinking it was a coincidence that she was leaving on a trip just as I was getting ready to go. I just got back from Minneapolis this morning," she said. "The man she was with was about my height, slim, and wearing blue jeans and a black shirt." "Can you tell me anything more about him?" Rob asked eagerly, writing down her description. "What kind of car did he have? Did you see it?" The woman paused and said, "He had short black hair, and I think he was in his 30s. I didn't see his face very well, just the side. I don't think he wore glasses. He was white for sure. I remember he opened the back door of the car so she could put her suitcase in. Then he helped her into the front seat. After that, he got in the car, and they drove off. The car was a brown Toyota Corolla. I'm certain of that because my sister has one that's almost the same, but hers is blue. Other than that, I can't really remember anything else." "Do you recall what time it was that morning? Did it seem like my daughter was upset at all?" "It was probably around 9:30. I left for Minneapolis at 10, so it must have been about half an hour before that. I didn't think your daughter looked upset or anything unusual. She seemed pretty normal to me." Rob thanked her for her help after he was sure she had no more information. It was close to dinner time, so he decided to leave the rest of the homes for another day. He was glad to have learned more about the man who had taken Katie, but it still didn't help much in finding her. After a good dinner, Rob continued talking to his neighbors until he had visited all the homes on the block. No one had anything new to share, but he felt it had been a productive day. He looked forward to seeing Detective Maki in the morning with the new information he had. He hoped they might have checked the grocery receipt for fingerprints. It would be great if they found a fingerprint that could help identify the man who had taken Katie. Rob spent the rest of his evening reading the newspapers. When he finished, he called his brother-in-law to update him on everything that had happened. Jim was surprised to hear about the grocery receipt and offered to help him find the grocery store, the Falls Grocery. Rob welcomed the help, since he wasn't looking forward to that task. Jim suggested that they might not need to visit all the towns if they called the Chamber of Commerce in the larger ones and a few businesses in the smaller ones. He felt that the people they spoke to would likely know the names of other businesses in the area. Rob thought it was a good idea and asked Jim if he could start the next day. Rob planned to go to the police station early and see a psychologist after lunch. Jim happily agreed to help and said he would work from home for a few days. He wanted to make sure he talked to enough people in all the Falls communities to find out about the Falls grocery. Rob felt really grateful for his brother-in-law's help and for the smart suggestion to avoid driving all over the place. He realized that he didn't need to travel to all those towns, and he appreciated Jim for reminding him of that. This meant he could get to bed early and have a good night's sleep before what he expected to be a busy week ahead. Day 15. On Monday morning, Rob stood next to Detective Maki's desk when Maki arrived for work. Maki was surprised to see him there so early. He asked, "What are you doing here so early?" He noticed the papers in Rob's hand and added, "I bet you have some new information for me today." "I think I have found a couple of things that might help us. This weekend, while cleaning my daughter's room, I found a folded grocery store receipt that doesn't belong to us." Rob handed the receipt to Maki, who looked at it closely. After studying the receipt for a few minutes, Maki said, "This is dated June 1st of this year. That was a Sunday, just over a week before your daughter went missing." "I didn't notice the date, just the name of the grocery store. On Sunday, I drove all the way to the border and back, and I confirmed that the store is not along Highway 61. I've made a list of towns in Minnesota with falls in their names, and my brother-in-law is checking into the store starting today. Hopefully, we can find out something soon." Maki thought for a moment and then said, "I can send a request to the state police to ask if any officers know of a grocery store by that name. They don't have offices everywhere, so it's possible they might not be aware of it. Your brother-in-law's work will also be helpful." Rob considered this new way to find the grocery store and said, "I'll let my brother-in-law know what you're doing, and maybe he should wait a day before calling until we hear back from the state police. Don't do that. The state police may take some time to respond, and if your brother-in-law finds that store before we hear from them, it could save us some time." Detective Maki smiled as he spoke. "Making a few phone calls may take time and cost money, but it might help us get better and quicker information. Did you find anything else? You said you had some new details." "Yes," Rob replied. "One of my neighbors saw Katie leave with a man around 9:30 on the day she went missing. The man was about the right height and had similar hair color to the other two descriptions. She also noted that he was white, thin, and had no glasses. She mentioned his car was a brown Toyota Corolla." Detective Maki wrote down the information and asked for the neighbor's name. "We will reach out to her and show her some pictures of cars from different years and styles. This may help us get a clearer idea of the car. Our artist could also draw a sketch of the man based on her descriptions. This information could be really helpful." "Did you find anything else?" "I brought a receipt, hoping they could find fingerprints on it," Rob said. "Could you check if they've looked at it yet? They got it yesterday, but actually, it was Saturday night when I gave it to them. Do you think they had enough time to check it?" Maki picked up the phone and talked to the technicians. After a lengthy call, he turned to Rob. "They found fingerprints from 3 people on that receipt. One is yours, which is expected. The second one is from someone we don't know yet. They checked the national database but didn't find a match. The third print might surprise you. It was your wife's." Maki looked at Rob, intrigued. "That seems odd to me." Rob frowned, confused. Erin had been missing for almost 3 months when that receipt was made. "This means she is still alive," he said, feeling a mix of emotions. "And it suggests that the man who took her is the same one who took Katie. It always seemed strange that both disappeared in similar ways, but now we have proof. They were taken by the same man." He sank into a chair by Maki's desk, his legs feeling weak. Relief washed over him knowing his wife and daughter were together, but he still could not understand why they were taken. "We're slowly learning about this man," Maki said. "We have a partial description and details about his car. If we can find this grocery store, we might identify where he lives. It seems he has taken both Erin and Katie for some reason. We can be fairly sure he passed through Grand Marais with them," Rob added. We know he somehow convinced each of them to go with him, either by threatening or persuading them. We might have one fingerprint that belongs to him. Is there anything else you can think of, Detective Maki? Rob waited, eager for the detective's response. Detective Maki sat silently, clearly thinking about what Rob had said. Finally, he replied, "You have covered most of it, to be honest. There's one thing I've been considering. Until now, we just assumed they were here in Minnesota. But if you keep going up Highway 61 past where you think your loved ones were seen, you reach Canada, specifically Ontario. Shouldn't we think about the possibility that he could have taken them to Canada? It might explain why they have disappeared without a trace." You might be right, Detective Maki. That makes sense and could clear up a lot. But how would we find out about that unless someone goes to Canada to search for them? Do you think that's what I should do next? That could be the best option for you. We could also ask our department to send a fax to the provincial police and the police in Thunder Bay. They might have useful information. I just don't know if going there will turn up anything helpful. Even if you don't find anything, there's a chance they could still be there. Detective Maki looked a bit unsure as he spoke to Rob. Detective, I have an appointment this afternoon, and we still don't know if my brother-in-law has found anything about the grocery store and whether it's in one of the Minnesota cities. How about you inform the state police and the Canadian police, and we'll see if they have any information about the grocery store. Depending on what we learn, I can decide whether to go to Canada tomorrow or Wednesday. Also, I've finished the course for the right to carry permit. Can you check if the permit process can be speeded up? If I'm closing in on this guy, I should have the permit to prepare for the next steps. Detective Maki glanced at Rob and then picked up the phone to make a call. Rob couldn't hear what was said as the detective turned away while talking. A couple of minutes later, Maki hung up the phone and faced Rob. "You're in luck. To be honest, we did a thorough background check on you when you first reported your wife missing. It's quite common for the husband to be involved when a wife goes missing, so we looked closely. We did another check when your daughter went missing. Everything needed for your permit is all set, so now we just need to get the paperwork signed. If you come back here later today, I will have the permit for you." Rob thanked the detective for his help and said he would return around 4 o'clock. The two men shook hands, and Rob left the office. When he got back to his car, he decided to visit his brother-in-law's house to see how his phone calls were going. Rob also wanted to update Jim on what the police department was doing to help find the grocery store, hoping they could check all the locations in Minnesota by the end of the day. He thought it didn't make much sense to search for Aaron and Katie in Canada if the answers were here. It was just a few minutes before 10 a.m. when Rob arrived at Jim's house. He had stopped to pick up a couple of coffees for them on the way and brought them inside when Jim answered the door. He handed Jim one of the cups and said, "How is your search for that grocery store going? Have you found anything yet?" Jim thanked him for the coffee and replied, "I've called all the chambers of commerce in the larger cities, but none of them recognize the name The Falls Grocery. I still have 5 smaller places to check, and I plan to finish them today." As they sat in the kitchen with their coffee, Rob told Jim about the latest updates on the search for Aaron and Katie. Jim was surprised to hear that Aaron's fingerprint was on the grocery store receipt Rob had found. Like Rob, he felt it was a good sign that Aaron was still safe. He was also surprised when Rob mentioned he might have to go to Canada for the next part of the search. Before leaving, Rob asked Jim to call him on his cell phone as soon as he finished his calls about the Falls Grocery. He was eager to move on to the next stage of the search, wherever it might lead. Rob had time to go home for lunch before his meeting with Gloria Baker. When he got there, he checked his messages and found a couple from people who thought they had seen Aaron. One was from Duluth and another from Hinckley, but when Rob got more details, it was clear both were mistakes. While at home, he took the chance to call Katie's school to speak with the principal. He wanted to make sure that when he got Katie back, she would be able to either take makeup exams over the summer or receive credit for her work during the year. He knew it might be optimistic, but he felt it was something important for his peace of mind and for his daughter's future. He was happy to learn that Katie had done very well at school this year, and she could continue with her classmates in the fall. Rob made a sandwich for lunch and finished reading the morning newspaper before heading to his appointment at 1 o'clock. In the last 2 days, he had made a short list of things he wanted to discuss with Dr. Baker. He remembered to take that list with him because he felt he needed her advice on the topics he wrote down. With all the new information he had learned recently, Rob felt more confident than he had in the 2 weeks since Katie had gone missing. Rob rang the doorbell at Dr. Baker's house right at 1 p.m. and was let in a moment later. Once they were settled in her office, Rob took out his list and explained to Dr. Baker that he wanted to cover some important points before he went out again to look for Aaron and Katie. He started by explaining that there was evidence Aaron was alive a week before Katie disappeared. His first question was, if Aaron is alive, what kind of mental state might she be in after 3 months with the man who took her? Dr. Baker thought for a moment before responding, "That's hard to say. It really depends on what happened during her time with this man. If she chose to be with him, she might be okay, but it could be hard to get her to leave him. If she was taken against her will, she is likely feeling very scared and worried, and her health might have been affected. There's also a chance she could develop what is called Stockholm Syndrome, where she might start to feel some connection to her captor. Any of these could be possible, and there might be other outcomes too." Rob hesitated before asking his next question. "What if she has gone through something traumatic? I need to understand what kind of psychological effects that might have on her." Any trauma can have an effect, but how serious that effect is can be different for everyone. It might not affect her much at all, or it could be very hard for her. There's no way to know for sure. How strong is your wife? "She's always been very strong, just like Katie. I like to think they can handle almost anything, but I wonder if you could give me some advice on how to deal with different situations if they come up. I want to be ready for whatever happens." Rob checked his list again and said, "I guess my last question is, could I ask you to help my wife and daughter if they need support after I find them? I know you might think I'm being too hopeful about finding them, but I really am an optimist at heart. My worries that they could have been harmed are almost gone now, since Aaron was still alive 3 weeks ago. If she is alive, then there's no reason to think that Katie isn't too. I'm really hopeful that this receipt I found could lead to something. However, we need to find out where the store is. If we can't locate it in Minnesota, I might leave for Canada in the morning to check there." The doctor quickly replied, "I'm more than happy to say my door will be open for both of them if you find them. If you do locate them and have concerns about how they feel, just call me right away. I can help over the phone. Sometimes just a quick suggestion can make a difference." These were the main questions Rob had. After getting answers, he and the doctor wrapped up the appointment by talking about Rob's own feelings about the situation. When he left, Rob felt more confident about how he could manage things for himself and his family once he found them. He went home to make some calls to friends and family to share the new updates. At 4 o'clock, Rob entered the third-floor offices of the Duluth Police Department. Detective Maki noticed him and waved him over to his desk, smiling as he held up several papers for Rob to see. When Rob reached the desk, he took the papers from Maki, who seemed excited to share the news. Rob saw that the top paper was a permit allowing him to carry a firearm. "You got it for me. Thank you so much, Detective. I wasn't sure you could do this so quickly. After I leave here, I'll visit a store I like to see what smaller firearms they have. But I have another question. Will this cover more than one firearm? I also have an old one from my father, and I don't remember if that was mentioned in the class." Detective Maki smiled and said, "You're welcome, Rob. By the way, please call me Eric. We've been in contact so often that we can drop the formalities. As for your permit, it covers both. Just remember you can't carry both at the same time." "Again, thank you, Eric. You've been very helpful since you realized I didn't cause my wife and daughter to disappear." Rob chuckled a bit at that. "You are right. We did have our suspicions at first. You have to understand, though, that in this line of work it's common to look at the husband and father closely. I wish it weren't so, but that's how things often go. We looked into everything very carefully, and nothing we've found supports that idea in your case." Rob thought for a moment and then replied, "Thank you for checking. I'm relieved to hear you looked into it thoroughly. I'm worried that you and the rest of the team are spending all your time on this case, searching for my wife and daughter. I haven't heard from my brother-in-law since he did most of the checking around Minnesota this morning. Have any state police departments reached out with news about the Falls grocery?" "We haven't heard anything from anyone. With your brother-in-law and our faxes, it seems likely that you may need to go to Canada. I've sent faxes to the police departments there, but I haven't received any replies. Since it's not one of their local residents missing, I'm not sure how much help we will get. We'll have to wait and see, Mackie said. Well, I appreciate that update, Eric. I think I'll leave now to take care of a few things. Then I'll stop by my brother-in-law's to see if he has found anything more. He may still be working on it since he hasn't called, Rob said. He stood up, and they exchanged farewells as Rob left the office. Rob headed straight to Fred's Sporting Goods, where he chose a small, .25 caliber automatic for protection. He also bought a secure box for it, a box of ammunition, and cleaning supplies. He decided to get some bullets for his father's old .38 gun, too, in case he could get it fixed. Once he locked his purchases in the car's trunk, he went to Jim Prentice's house to check on his progress and see if he needed any help with calls. When Jim opened the door, he said, "I was just about to call you. I finished the last calls a few minutes ago and came up empty. No one knew where the Falls grocery is located." "Thanks for trying, Jim. It looks like I'll need to drive north to Canada. The police haven't found anything about the Falls grocery either. I'll check in with them again tomorrow, but if you weren't able to find anything, I doubt they will either. How about I take you out for dinner to thank you for your help? Are you interested?" Jim smiled and said, "I won't say no to a free meal. Where do you want to go?" The two men agreed on the Red Bull Steakhouse and left right away to get a table before it got too busy. It was just a 10-minute drive, and they were seated right away when they arrived. Soon they were enjoying cold drinks while waiting for the food menu. They were not in a hurry to eat, so they took their time talking about Aaron and Katie's disappearance. Rob hadn't told Jim about his plans to take a firearms course or buy a handgun. Jim was surprised but understood Rob's feelings. They didn't know what kind of person might have taken the two women, and having a firearm could make a big difference if Rob decided to look for them. Rob explained he did not want to confront anyone, but thought it could be useful to have one. He hoped the police would take care of it, but if that didn't happen, he felt he might have to do something himself. As they talked after ordering their meals, Jim shared some tips about visiting Canada to help make Rob's trip easier. He suggested that Rob stop at the last gas station in Grand Portage to fill up and change some money. Jim also mentioned that there was a good map of the province at a tourist information center just north of the border. He pointed out that there were not many roads in that part of Ontario because of the smaller population. After finishing their meals, they each had a last drink before leaving. Rob had some tasks to finish before his trip in the morning, so he declined Jim's offer to visit his home that evening. After dropping off Jim, Rob got home by 8 p.m. He brought in the lockbox and cleaning kit, spending over 15 minutes looking for his father's old handgun. He finally found it tucked away between the floor joists, a place he hoped Aaron wouldn't find. He thought she would have wanted him to get rid of it. Once he found the old handgun, he spent half an hour cleaning and oiling it to make sure it worked well. All that was left to do was to try it out, and he knew the pistol range where he had taken the course was open until midnight. He placed the cleaned handgun into the lockbox with his new one and went to the range to test them. It took him only 15 minutes at the range to see that both handguns worked well. After trying both and hitting his target each time, he locked them back up and returned home. He still needed to pack for his trip and wanted to do a better job this time since he realized he hadn't prepared well during his last stay in Grand Marais. By 11 o'clock, he had his clothes packed and only needed to add his toiletries in the morning before leaving. After taking a shower, he was in bed by midnight, ready to start early the next day. Day 16. He was on the road by 7:30 in the morning, planning to call Detective Mackie while driving along the highway. This approach helped him start his day earlier, and he didn't think the police would have any new information about the mystery store. Following his plan, he called Detective Mackie while driving through Beaver Bay, and as he expected, there was nothing new. He was now free to head to Canada to continue searching for his family. Just after 10 o'clock in the morning, he arrived at Grand Portage and stopped at a gas station. Needing to stretch his legs, he went inside to pay and grab a cup of coffee. He asked the cashier if there was anything important he should know before crossing into Canada. He was surprised when she first mentioned that handguns were not allowed in Canada. Curious about what to do with his handgun, she suggested visiting a store nearby, which would keep handguns safe for a fee while their owners were in Canada. He thanked her for this advice, realizing it could have caused a problem if he had crossed the border with the lockbox. Rob had placed the lockbox in his trunk and was now standing over it, thinking about how to handle the situation. In the end, he decided to wrap the old handgun in cloth and store it in his toolbox. He would keep the new automatic in the lockbox until he crossed into Canada. With his plan set, he drove to the store and checked in the lockbox. For what he thought was a fair fee, he was allowed to leave it there for safekeeping. He put the receipt in his wallet and returned to his car, ready to enter Canada. Crossing the border, he had no trouble with the customs officer. Once on the other side, he decided to park and take some of his posters inside the building to see if any of the officers recognized Aaron or Katie. Unfortunately, none of them did, so he soon moved on. His next stop was at the tourist information office across the highway from the customs building. He showed his poster, but no one recognized the names. However, he got a couple of maps and some information about motels he might stay at. He was back on the road quickly, heading north. The tourist official told him where the Ontario Provincial Police Office was, and even drew him a simple map. He made this his first stop to see if they had any information to help with his search. Less than an hour later, he arrived at a large Ontario Provincial Police Office on Highway 17, just under a mile west of Highway 130, the shortcut given to him by the Tourist Bureau. He took several of his posters inside and soon spoke with the desk sergeant. It was clear the man had not seen the facts from the Duluth police, as everything Rob mentioned was new to him. He took a handful of posters from Rob, planning to give them out to the officers on their next shift. He mentioned that they could make more copies if needed. Rob then asked the desk sergeant if there was a place he could check for a store called the Falls Grocery. The sergeant quickly suggested Kakabeka Falls, a village about 15 miles west. He also mentioned there were other towns and villages with falls in their names. For nearly 30 minutes, the sergeant helped Rob by marking possible locations on a map, showing him features that might relate to the grocery store's name. Rob thanked the officer for his assistance and asked for a business card, just in case he needed to call for more information. The officer handed over his card and told Rob his name was Sergeant Kurt O'Brien. Rob introduced himself, and they shook hands. Sergeant O'Brien wished Rob good luck in finding his wife and daughter, encouraging him to reach out if he had questions or found the person he was looking for. He explained that while they had officers patrolling the rural areas, there was no guarantee one would be nearby if Rob needed help quickly. Rob expressed his gratitude for the information and left to continue his search. Feeling a bit down as he left the Ontario Provincial Police Office, Rob thought about the many possible locations scattered across northern Ontario. He decided to head back a bit into Thunder Bay for lunch. The highway he was on was called Highway 17, but it turned into Arthur Saint as he entered the city. A few blocks later, he spotted a Boston pizza restaurant and chose it as a good spot for a meal. His lunch, a pasta special, was very tasty, and he allowed himself a dessert with his coffee. While in the city, he thought it would be good to visit the police station. After finishing his meal, he asked the waitress for directions. She kindly gave him a free tourist map, pointed out the police station, and showed him a route to take. Feeling confident, he thanked her and headed for the station. When Rob arrived at the Thunder Bay police station, he noticed it was a large building. He went to the front desk to ask who could help with his wife and daughter's missing persons case, and was directed to the office of Detective Parks on the second floor. The detective surprised Rob by saying he had seen the information about Aaron and Katie that the Duluth police had sent over. He explained that they had shared the facts with the patrol officers during their meeting that morning. Rob was relieved to hear this and asked, "Did any of your officers have any information on them? Did anything happen with it?" "I'm afraid not," Detective Parks replied. "Your posters have more details than the facts we got from Duluth. If you leave me some copies, I'll make sure our officers see them in the squad room." "I can give you as many as you need. I have more in my car, or I can stop by a copy shop if that helps." Rob felt hopeful that his posters and worries were being taken seriously by this department, which was a much better response than what he had gotten from Duluth. Here, he didn't have to prove he was innocent. Encouraged by Detective Parks's response, Rob wanted help finding the Falls Grocery, which had caused him so many problems. He opened a folder, pulled out a grocery receipt, and asked, "Could you look at this and tell me what you think, Detective Parks? I found this receipt at home after my daughter went missing, and I believe it was left by the person responsible. I can't find a place called the Falls Grocery in Minnesota." Rob handed the receipt to the detective. preparing himself for a reply that might not be helpful. He was pleasantly surprised by what the detective said next. The detective glanced at the receipt and said, "Yes, I know this place. I shop there sometimes when I go fishing. It's in Kakabeka Falls, about 20 miles west of here. It's a well-known spot, sells fishing gear, gas, and groceries," he added. "Are you serious? It's hard to believe that after all the trouble we faced back home, you were able to find this place so fast." Rob leaned forward, surprised. "I guess I shouldn't doubt your knowledge, but it really surprises me that you figured it out so quickly." Detective Parks smiled and said, "I'm sure about this. You can question me if you want, but I assure you, it's right on the left side of the highway when you drive into Kakabeka Falls." Feeling a rush of urgency, Rob wanted to get to Kakabeka Falls to talk to the people at the grocery store and see if anyone recognized his wife or daughter. "How do I get there from here? Can you give me directions so I don't get lost leaving town?" Rob stood, waiting for the detective's reply. "It's easy to find Kakabeka Falls. When you leave the parking lot, turn right, which is south, and go straight through the first set of lights until you reach the Harbor Expressway. It has lights too, and you'll turn there and head west. Just keep going straight on the Harbor Expressway until you reach Highway 17, which is about 10 miles away at most. It's another 10 miles to Kakabeka Falls. You really can't miss it." Rob thanked the detective for helping him find the Falls grocery after so long. He left a dozen copies of his poster, and the detective promised to share them with the officers on duty. He said he could make more copies if needed, and wished Rob good luck in his search. As Rob left the Thunder Bay police station and turned right, he felt hopeful for the first time in a while. At the first stoplight, he called his brother-in-law in Duluth, but got no answer. So he left a voicemail to let him know that the Falls grocery was found in Kakabeka Falls, Ontario, and that he was on his way. He promised to call again if he had more updates. He easily found Highway 17 and began the second half of his drive to Kakabeka Falls in light traffic. This allowed him to enjoy the beautiful countryside he was passing through. There were many farms and well-kept homes along the highway. He thought it would be a nice place to visit one day with Aaron and Katie. Before long, he reached the eastern edge of Kakabeka Falls and saw the big sign welcoming him to the Falls grocery. Rob felt nervous as he parked beside the store. He took a deep breath and walked to the entrance. Inside the store, he was unsure who to talk to first. He decided to approach a woman in the office near the checkout counters. She was focused on her calculator, so he waited for her to notice him. When she finally looked up, Rob said, "Hi, can you help me with this cash register receipt? Is there anything on it that would tell me who made the purchase?" He handed her the receipt and waited anxiously as she examined it. After a moment, she spoke. "I'm sorry, but this is just a regular receipt for items paid in cash. If it had been charged or paid with a credit card, I could have given you more information, but I can't help with this." She handed the receipt back to Rob with a kind expression and began to return to her work. "What about these two people? Do you recognize either of them? This is my wife and daughter, and they're missing from Duluth. The person who took my daughter dropped this receipt, and I'm hoping to track them down." He handed the woman one of his posters and waited with hope. The woman seemed more interested now and looked closely at Rob's poster before saying, "No, I'm sure I haven't seen either of them. I don't get out of this office very much, so I don't often see anyone who doesn't come to the door, like you just did." She returned the poster and waited to see if Rob had anything else to say. "Oh, okay. I was really hoping someone might have seen my wife. Her fingerprint was found on the receipt." Rob thought for a moment and then asked, "Would it be all right if I show this poster to the other employees? Maybe one of them saw my wife or daughter. I'll try not to interrupt them." "Go ahead and talk to them. Just try not to distract them while they're serving customers. It's better to wait until they're free. The cashiers are regulars, so if either of them was here during the day, one of these girls might have seen them." "Thanks a lot," said Rob. "I'll make sure not to disturb them too much. I've shown these posters in a lot of other places, so I know what you mean. Also, can I leave one of my posters on your bulletin board? Maybe one of your customers has seen them." "Sure, you can leave one of your posters." When she finished speaking, she turned back to her calculator, and Rob left to start talking with the cashiers. Rob showed his poster to the first two cashiers, but neither recognized Aaron or Katie. He had to wait a moment for the last girl to finish checking out a customer. After she was done, she began cleaning the checkout counter, so Rob stepped up to show her the pictures. "Excuse me, could you please take a look at my poster and let me know if you've seen either of these two women? They are both missing from Duluth," Rob said as he held out his poster. He had done this many times before and always felt hopeful when he asked. The girl seemed uninterested as she took it from his hand and glanced at it. Rob sensed she was just going through the motions, but a moment later she said, "You know, I think I've seen this one." She pointed at Katie's picture. "She wasn't in the store, though. She was at one of the gas pumps. I remember her streaked hair, and she looked like this. I recall she seemed a bit off next to the pump." Rob was surprised to hear that. He could see it in his expression when she looked at him. "She's only 14. I've never known her to be unwell, so she must have just been having a tough moment," Rob said. The girl thought for a moment and replied, "Well, she did seem a bit unsteady. I remember clearly that she was wobbling a bit. You should talk to Nathan about her. He was pumping gas for them at the time and helped her get back into the car. A few weeks ago, I think it was late in the day. You might want to check with Nathan. He could tell you more. I believe he is working today." The cashier looked at the picture of Katie before calling over to another girl who was putting items on shelves. "Hey, Lucy, could you come over here for a moment?" The second girl walked to the checkout, and the cashier handed her the poster. "Do you remember this girl? She was at the gas pumps and looked unwell. I remember us talking about how young she seemed." Lucy took the poster and studied it closely. "Yes, I remember her. You mentioned she looked very young. Nathan helped her because the guy with her seemed a bit confused. It seemed like the guy did not know how to help her." Rob couldn't wait to ask, "What can you tell me about the guy with her? Can you describe him, or do you know what kind of car they were in?" He looked back and forth between the two women as he spoke. The cashier replied, "I don't remember the guy clearly, but I think the car was a dark color. What about you, Lucy? Do you recall anything else?" "I think the guy was a bit thin and had dark hair. I believe the car was brown, but I might be mistaken. Nathan is the one you should ask because he helped them when all this happened," Lucy said. "Can you show me where Nathan is?" Rob asked, wanting to talk to the pump attendant right away. "I don't think he's here yet," the cashier replied. "He starts around 6 tonight. You could check with the office for his schedule." Rob thanked the women and went to the office. He got the attention of the same woman and asked, "I've been told Nathan might have seen my daughter when he was helping with their car. Can you let me know when he is scheduled to work? The cashier thought he was coming in this afternoon." The office worker reached for a clipboard on the wall and looked at a list of names. After a moment, she turned back to Rob and said, "He is scheduled to work at 6 p.m. and should be here until 11. He usually arrives a few minutes before his shift starts. You might be able to call him at home if you'd like. I can give you his number." Rob asked her to write down the gas attendant's home phone number. After that, he asked if he could use her phone to call Nathan. After receiving permission, he called Nathan's house and ended up speaking with the young man's mother. She told Rob that her son had gone fishing for the afternoon but would be going to work at 6 p.m. She wasn't sure where he had gone since he had several favorite fishing spots nearby. Rob thanked her for her help and planned to wait until 6 p.m. to learn more about Katie and the man she was with. He knew he had to pass nearly 3 hours while waiting for Nathan's arrival. To fill the time, Rob decided to visit other shops in Kakabeka Falls to see if anyone had seen Aaron or Katie. First, he showed his poster to the staff at the Falls grocery. Unfortunately, none of the clerks or stockers recognized either of them. After leaving the store, he continued to explore the other businesses in the village. In about an hour and a half, he had visited all the shops, but still hadn't found anyone who recognized them. By 5 p.m., he was beginning to feel hungry, so he decided to have dinner at the Cascades dining room. He enjoyed a perfectly cooked steak and finished his meal just before 6, heading back to the grocery store with hope that Nathan would arrive on time and be able to help. Noticing that his gas tank needed filling, he pulled up to the pumps, thinking it would be an excellent way to meet Nathan. When he got out of his car, a tall young man about 18 came out to assist him. Rob shared his request for fuel and then asked, "Are you Nathan?" The young man looked surprised and replied, "Yes, I am. Do I know you?" Rob quickly explained, "No, you don't know me, but I'm looking for my daughter. She might have been here a couple of weeks ago." He held up his poster for Nathan to see. Nathan looked at the poster closely and said, "Yes, I think I remember her. She wasn't feeling well. I helped her back to her car. She seemed a little lost. The man with her didn't seem to know what to do." "Are you sure it was my daughter?" Rob asked. Nathan carefully looked at the picture again, holding the poster in both hands. After a moment, he said, "I'm certain it was her. I recognize her face and the blonde streak in her hair." "Can you tell me anything about the man she was with or the car they drove? What was he like?" Rob asked. Nathan thought for a moment and replied, "I think I can. He's a bit shorter than you, slender, and has short dark hair. He comes here occasionally for gas, maybe once a month. He seems to live in the West, around Uppsala, I think. He drives a brown Toyota Corolla, but I'm not sure about the year. This was the only time I saw him with your daughter." Rob felt delighted to hear that Nathan's description matched what he had gathered from other witnesses. It seemed clear that he had seen the man more than once, and any new information he offered was likely accurate. "You mentioned he is from Uppsala. What kind of place is that, and where is it exactly?" "I've never heard of it before," Rob said as he waited patiently for Nathan to reply. "Uppsala is about 75 miles west on Highway 17. It's a small town with a few houses, a store, and a gas station. There used to be a sawmill there. I'm not sure if he lives in Uppsala. It could be nearby. I know he has mentioned Uppsala a couple of times when he's come here for gas. We've talked about fishing a few times because I enjoy it a lot, and it sounds like he does too. If I remember right, he mentioned Lac des Mille Lacs as a place he goes often, which isn't too far from Uppsala." Rob felt hopeful as he learned new details about the man he was looking for. "What kind of person is he? Does he seem like someone who would cause problems? He has supposedly taken my wife and daughter, and I just can't understand why anyone would do that. I'm worried he might be a threat." Nathan shook his head. "He doesn't seem like a troubling person at all. I don't know him well, so I can't say for certain. Your daughter didn't look upset when I saw her, but maybe he had some influence on her. She looked a bit shaky and unsteady while walking, which isn't normal." Rob paused for a moment. "Is there anything else you remember about him or his vehicle? Anything that stood out?" Nathan finished pumping gas and ran Rob's credit card while thinking about his questions. "Honestly, I can't think of anything. We've mainly talked about fishing. The night your daughter was here, I didn't get a chance to really talk to him. He left right after I got her back in the car. You might find out more by asking people in Uppsala. If he lives nearby, someone might recognize him from his vehicle or what I've described." Nathan smiled as he continued. "I'm not usually good at remembering details about people, but he looked normal. He was always clean-shaven when I've seen him. I think he has dark eyes, but I'm not totally sure." Rob chuckled briefly. "I really think you've helped me a lot. I'm going to drive to Uppsala to see what I can find out. There's still plenty of daylight for me to get there and look around. If it's such a small place, I should be able to ask everyone about him and my daughter quickly, so I can get the authorities involved." Rob thanked Nathan for his help and got into his car for the important drive to Uppsala. Before he left the parking lot, he called Sergeant O'Brien of the Ontario Provincial Police to share what he had learned and where he was headed. When he reached the police, he learned that Sergeant O'Brien had gone home for the day, and help wouldn't be available for a few hours since all officers were busy with an important situation on Highway 11 east of Atikokan. The evening shift, Sergeant asked Rob to call from Uppsala if he found any useful information, and they would check if any officers were free then. Rob thanked him and called his brother-in-law in Duluth to share what he had learned in Kakabeka Falls. Jim was happy to hear that they might have tracked the man who had taken his sister to a certain area. He wished Rob luck in his next steps, following the man with dark hair to Uppsala. As Rob drove on the highway, he called Detective Maki to let him know he was getting closer to the person who had taken his wife and daughter. Since Detective Maki was not available that day, Rob left a short message on his voicemail about where he was heading. Leaving Kakabeka Falls for Uppsala made him nervous, as he didn't know what awaited him when he found the man who had taken his family. As he drove away, Rob could see the falls that gave the village its name on his left. Soon, He crossed the Kamenistikia River and picked up speed on the highway going west to Uppsala. Knowing it would take at least an hour, he took a moment to enjoy the beautiful scenery. A relaxed drive through the countryside had always been a favorite summer activity for him and Erin when they first got married. He wished things were different and that Erin and Katie were with him instead of ahead on the road. The first part of his journey led him through gentle hills with signs of old farms now being taken back by nature. He passed fields that had needed a lot of hard work from the first settlers. Occasionally, he noticed areas where logging had taken place, leaving big clear spots surrounded by new bushes and small trees. Even though it looked empty now, he knew that in 50 years people would hardly remember it had ever been cut. As he continued west, the landscape changed, becoming more wild with marshy areas. At one point, he drove through a long peat bog with rocky spots mostly covered in evergreen trees. Small streams, rivers, and some lakes lined the highway. In a thick, wooded section, he saw a large moose standing at the edge of the trees, watching him as he drove by. It was a sight he had never seen before, and he wished he had brought his camera, although taking pictures of wildlife was not a priority when he left Duluth. After a little over an hour, he arrived in Uppsala. The first place Rob found was a big restaurant and gas station in an older building that had been changed many times. It was surrounded by small sheds and old cars, some looking like they had been there for years. The place wasn't crowded, and Rob hoped someone might know about Erin or Katie, or have information about the man driving the brown Toyota Corolla. He decided to talk to the gas station attendant first, since he might have seen the car. Rob walked into the small office where the attendant worked and waited for the customer in front of him to finish. Once he was alone with the attendant, he took out his poster and said, "Could you look at these pictures and tell me if you've ever seen these two women? They might have been with a thin man with short black hair driving a brown Toyota Corolla." Rob handed the poster to the attendant and waited as he looked at it. "I don't know either of them, but the man you describe sounds familiar. Angus Blair drives a car like that and matches what you said. I haven't seen him in a few weeks, but he usually stops by here now and then." Rob was surprised he had found someone who knew the man he was looking for. "Can you tell me where he lives? I really need to find him." The attendant thought for a moment and said, "Honestly, I don't know where he lives. I only see him when he comes in for gas. Someone else might know him or where he lives, but I don't know his friends. I only remember his name because I made a joke the first time I saw it on his credit card. It's a pretty uncommon name." Seeing Rob's disappointment, the young man suggested, "You could ask in the restaurant. One of the waitresses or the cashier might know Angus or someone else who fits the description. It sure sounds like him." Rob thanked him for the help and left the gas station. The restaurant didn't seem busy, so he walked in and stopped at the cashier's counter. The cashier got up from a stool behind the register and asked, "Can I help you?" Rob showed his poster and asked, "Have you seen either of these two women? They are both missing from Duluth, and I heard they might be in this area. They could be with a thin man driving a brown Toyota Corolla." He added, "He has black hair and is a bit shorter than I am." The cashier examined the poster closely and replied, "I don't recognize either of them, and I don't know much about cars. I'm not sure what a Toyota Corolla is. Do you happen to know a man named Angus Blair? I've been told he has a car like that and lives somewhere around here. He might go fishing a lot." The cashier thought for a moment and then said, "The name sounds familiar, but I can't remember why. Everyone around here seems to fish, so that doesn't help me." Rob thanked the cashier and said he would like to talk to the waitresses to see if they could help him. She told him there were only 2 on duty and that he could go ahead and speak with them. He was feeling a bit hungry, so he decided to sit at a table where he could get a quick meal and also talk to one of the waitresses. He had just taken a seat when a young woman with dark hair came over to take his order. "What can I get for you tonight?" The waitress had her pen ready, waiting for him to say what he wanted to eat. Rob had quickly glanced at the menu, so he answered without pausing. "I'd like a roast beef sandwich, a slice of apple pie, and a cup of coffee. Before you go, can I show you a poster with pictures of 2 missing women? I heard they might be around here, and I'm wondering if you've seen them." He placed the poster on the table in front of her. She looked at it for a moment and then said, "No, they don't look familiar to me. I haven't seen either of them." What about a man with short black hair who drives a brown Toyota Corolla? Does that ring a bell? I'm sorry, I don't know anyone like that. Do you have a photo of him? No, I don't have a picture. I've been told his name might be Angus Blair. Does that name mean anything to you? Rob looked at her with hope, wishing she might recognize the name. She shook her head and said, No, I don't know anyone by that name. Rob thought for a moment and then said to the waitress, When you take my order, could you ask the other waitress to come by my table when she has a chance? I'd like to show her my poster. Maybe she has seen one of these women or knows who this man is. The waitress agreed to let her co-worker know and then left to get his order. About 2 minutes later, the second waitress came to Rob's table. He showed her the poster and asked the same questions he had asked the first waitress. Unfortunately, she couldn't help him either, so he thanked her and let her return to her work. His meal arrived shortly after she left, and he quickly began to enjoy his sandwich. He hadn't realized how hungry he was and finished off the sandwich and pie in no time. Afterward, he relaxed for a few minutes with his cup of coffee. He knew he couldn't take too long since it would be dark in about 3 hours. After finishing his coffee, he decided to try the next place along the highway, a smaller gas station. The parking lot was nearly empty, indicating it was not very busy. Rob got out of his car and went into the small office where the clerk sat reading a book. He put it down when Rob approached. Rob took out his poster and handed it to the man at the counter. Can you tell me if you recognize either of these two women? They are missing from Duluth and might be in this area. After looking at the poster for a moment, the man replied, Sorry, I don't know either of them. He returned the poster to Rob. What about a man with short black hair driving a brown Toyota Corolla? Does that ring a bell? Rob waited for the man to think. No, I don't recognize that description either, he answered. Do you know a man named Angus Blair? I believe he lives around here and might fit the description I gave you. No, I don't know that name. Just so you know, I've only been here a couple of months and there are many people I haven't met yet. When I'm not working, I usually go fishing. Rob paused for a moment and then asked, Can you recommend anyone else I could talk to around here? Are there other shops besides this gas station and the one up the road? Well, there's a store on the hill. I think it might be closed now, but the owner lives in the back, so he could be there. He has a small post office too, so he might know about this Angus guy. Rob thanked the man for his help and decided to go to the store he had just been told about. He figured someone who runs the post office would know most people in the area. He drove quickly to the store and walked up to the entrance, only to find a big closed sign in the window. He looked through the glass and saw that the lights were off and the store was empty. Disappointed, Rob walked around the building looking for the back entrance, hoping to find the door to the living area. The back of the building faced south, and it had an old glassed-in porch across that side. He went up the stairs and knocked on the door leading into the porch. Not seeing any cars parked nearby made him worry that no one was home. He knocked again and was turning to leave when the door from the porch opened. An older man with white hair stepped out and walked toward him. Can I help you? The man asked. Rob raised his poster and replied, I'm looking for these two women. I was told they might be in this area. Do you know either of them? The man squinted at the pictures and said, No, I don't recognize them. Are you sure they're from around here? They're from Duluth, and they might be with a man living nearby. I'm searching for a man named Angus Blair. I was told he might know them or brought them here. The man thought for a moment and then said, Yes, I know that name. He comes here every week to get his mail and sometimes buys some groceries. Rob felt hopeful to finally have a lead. He quickly asked, Do you know where he lives? I really need to find him. Any help would mean a lot. Well, he stays at the summer home his parents had by the lake. I think they have passed away. Angus has been living there since last fall. You mentioned the women are from Duluth? The reason I ask is that Angus's parents were from Duluth, so he might have lived there before moving here. Can you tell me how to find the summer home? I want to check before it gets too dark. The man opened the door wider and said, I can do better than that. I'll draw you a little map. It's not easy to find if you don't know the area. Come inside while I get some paper. He stepped back and Rob followed him inside. The man pointed to a chair at the kitchen table and Rob sat down while the man searched a drawer for a pad of paper and a pen. Just as Rob was about to offer his own pen, the man found one and returned to the table. "You'll go about 12 miles west to a road that goes south. It's a dirt road, but there's a small sign saying Camp Road at the turnoff from the highway. Once you're on that road, follow this map to the Blair summer home." The elderly man then drew a map that looked easy to follow. When he finished, he handed the map to Rob, tracing the route with his finger. Rob thanked him for the help and stood to leave. However, the man seemed a bit disappointed and offered him a cup of tea or coffee. Rob politely declined, stating he wanted to find the summer home before dark. He left and got into his car. Before leaving the parking lot, he called the local police station to see if an officer could go with him. The desk sergeant told him that no officers would be free for an unknown amount of time because of a situation from before. Additionally, there was a new problem in Ignis involving a person who was barricaded. Rob thanked the sergeant for the update and decided to wait until the next day for an officer to join him. Annoyed, he hung up the phone and tossed it onto the seat. "If he thinks I'm going to wait until tomorrow, he is wrong," Rob said to himself as he shifted the car into gear and turned west on the highway, with a hand-drawn map beside him. The 12 miles of highway passed quickly under his wheels. He saw the sign for Camp Road ahead and slowed down as he turned left onto the dirt path from the paved road. He checked the map again as he traveled along the bumpy access road. After about 10 minutes, a clearing to the left told him he was close to the Blair summer home, according to the map. He chose to drive past the lane leading to the house to get a better look at the place and see if it matched what he had been told. The old man at the store had mentioned a large log home that served as the Blair summer residence. As Rob drove by, he spotted the log home he had heard about. A garage stood next to the house with its doors closed, and there was no car in sight. Rob parked his car off the traveled part of the road, about 100 yards past the Blair home. He decided to walk back quietly to look for a brown Toyota Corolla in the garage. He moved along the edge of the lot beside the trees to approach the garage from the side farthest from the house, wanting to avoid being spotted to make sure he was at the right location. When he reached the side of the garage, he crept along until he approached the corner. As he rounded the corner, he saw a window in the middle of the wall, walked over, and peeked inside the garage. It was quite dark inside, and he had to shield his eyes from the sunlight to see. When he did, he noticed a dark-colored car parked inside, clearly marked with the Toyota symbol. He felt this was enough proof that he had found the right place. Deciding to move to the corner of the garage closest to the house, he looked to see what was on the south side of the home. Peering around the corner, he didn't see anyone, and noticed that the south side had a full-length deck with several chairs and a round wooden table. The view was beautiful. The lake was only 100 feet away, with several islands scattered across it. The opposite shore was half a mile away, and Rob didn't see any other summer homes or boats in the area. Rob watched the large window on the side of the house, noticing no movement inside. After a moment, he decided to go closer to the house to see if anyone was inside. His heart raced as he walked across the yard, worried about being seen before he could find out if Aaron or Katie was in the room. When he got to the side of the house, he quietly approached the window. Looking in, he saw regular living room furniture, and no one was there. Turning his head a little, he noticed the room extended to the right, leading to a dining area and kitchen. While he was watching, he suddenly felt like someone was observing him, so he turned around. What he saw sent a chill through him. About 10 feet away, 2 large dogs stood, staring at him. He stepped to the left, and the dogs moved with him, growling softly. He hesitated, then tried to move to the right, and again the dogs followed, this time without any growling. As he reached the corner of the house, the dogs changed their positions, guiding him around the corner as if they were herding him. Turning the corner, he was startled to come face to face with a shotgun. Looking up, he recognized the man holding it, Angus Blair. Despite the vague descriptions he had heard, Rob knew this was the person he was looking for. "You shouldn't have come here, Rob Walsh. You should have stayed in Duluth," said Angus in a flat tone. Rob responded, "How could I not come? You've taken my wife and daughter from me. I had to find them." He stepped closer, noticing the weapon was not actually pointed directly at him. Before he could move much, Angus said, "Girls, keep an eye on him." The two dogs moved closer, positioning themselves so that Rob had little chance to escape easily. If I give them a command, they will listen and won't stop until I tell them to. Don't do anything rash. Rob felt fear, not for himself, but for Aaron and Katie. He quickly asked, "Where are my wife and daughter, Blair? I want to see them. If you've hurt them, you'll regret it." Even though he meant it, he realized his words sounded more bold than convincing. He got no response. Instead, Angus signaled him toward the door with a wave of the shotgun. Knowing he couldn't win against two watchful dogs and a firearm, he kept his hands visible and stepped inside. Angus followed with the shotgun, and the dogs positioned themselves protectively. Another wave of the shotgun guided him to a chair at the kitchen table. He sat down and waited for what would happen next. Angus leaned the shotgun against the wall and took a seat at the table. The dogs shifted to a spot where they could keep an eye on Rob. After a moment of sizing each other up, Angus reached into his pocket and pulled out a pair of handcuffs. He threw the handcuffs on the table and said to Rob, "Put one on your right wrist." After Rob did this, Angus added, "Now attach the other to the metal ring under the table." Rob reached under the table until he found a metal bolt. He secured the second handcuff and waited. Angus stood up to check it and, pleased, went back to his seat. He told the dogs, "Go to your room." The dogs quickly followed his command, walking through a small door off the kitchen, which swung open and closed a few times before settling shut. Rob saw a lock on the door and a metal loop on the frame, showing that there was a way to keep the dogs secure. "It's tiring for them to stay alert for too long," he heard Angus say. "They get really tense, and I don't think it's good for them." Angus seemed genuinely concerned about his dogs. They looked similar with the same coat patterns. Rob guessed they were probably 2 to 3 years old and had been well trained. "Now that you have me secured, tell me about my wife and daughter." "Where are they?" Rob asked, nervous about the answer but feeling sure they were okay, even though he couldn't see them. The fact that Aaron had been alive less than a month ago gave him hope. "They're both fine and will remain so as long as you don't give me any trouble." Angus looked at Rob and asked, "How did you find me?" Rob didn't want to say too much, so he replied, "People saw you, and I followed your path. It took some time, but here I am, and the police will be here soon." For a moment, Angus showed worry, but then he said, "If they knew where I was, they would have come with you. I doubt you told them where to find me. Maybe you meant to, but didn't have time. They do know that I was looking for you in this area. If I could find you, I'm certain they will too. It would be smart for you to just let me and my wife and daughter leave," Rob said earnestly, hoping to reach some understanding. "She's not your wife. She's going to be my wife." Angus started pacing in front of Rob, who looked completely confused. "What are you saying? We're married, and Katie is our daughter. How can you claim she will be your wife? Bring her here so I can ask her about this." "I'm sure she doesn't want to be your wife," Rob exclaimed. "She's going to be my wife. That's why I brought her here. Ever since high school, I've wanted her to be my wife. And now that I have my own place, she can be my wife." Angus was still pacing, and his face was getting a bit red, his voice getting louder. "Let's ask her about it." "Bring her in here and let's just ask her," Rob said, feeling frustrated that Angus seemed to be lost in his own thoughts. Rob thought about why he started searching and asked, "What about Katie? Why did you bring her here? Tell me that. Why is she here?" "Never mind. I had to bring her here. That's all you need to know." Angus was even more excited now, waving his hands as he spoke, and his face was getting redder. Rob began to worry about what Angus might do next and decided not to upset him further. Rob took a deep breath and spoke in a calm voice. "I understand why you would want Erin as your wife. She is such a good person, so caring and loving." Angus stopped pacing and looked at Rob. "Exactly. She would be perfect. I always knew she would be. In high school, she was the only one who treated me kindly. The other girls never even looked at me. She was the nicest of them all." As it started to get dark outside, Rob said to Angus, "I should move my car into your driveway. It's on the road and someone could hit it or steal it. The police might see it there too." Rob was trying to find a way to convince Angus to unlock his handcuffs, hoping for a chance to escape and get to the police. Unfortunately, Angus saw through his plan and shook his head. "You're right about moving your car. Hand me your keys and I'll bring it into the yard." He held out his hand, waiting for Rob to give him the keys. Reluctantly, Rob took the keys from his pocket and handed them to Angus. "Don't make a sound while I'm gone." Angus called out, "Girls, come here." The two dogs came out, leaving the door open behind them. "Keep an eye on him." The two dogs stood close to Rob, making it clear he couldn't do anything while Angus was away. With Angus gone, Rob looked around at his surroundings. The walls of the home were made of logs, with the doors breaking up their smooth look. The living room, dining area, and kitchen made an L shape, with two doors in the short wall near the kitchen. One door led to the room where the dogs stayed, and he guessed the second door led to bedrooms and a bathroom. That door was closed and had a deadbolt lock and a regular doorknob. Rob felt uneasy, thinking that Aaron and Katie were likely behind that closed door. While he had the chance, Rob checked the door that the dogs used to come in and out of their room. It was designed to swing both ways for easy access. The lock looked strong, and from a distance he could see that the screws were big. He was sure that the dogs wouldn't be able to open the door if it was locked. These two dogs seemed too fierce for him to try and escape if they got loose. Rob heard a car outside and looked up just in time to see his car coming up the driveway, passing by the window he had been watching only minutes before. A moment later it backed up, and he saw that it was being turned. The only reason he could think of was to move it behind the garage, out of sight. Any hope of someone seeing his car at the Blair home felt slim. He realized he needed a plan to escape, but he was unsure what to do right then. A little while later, his captor walked in through the back door, which led to the deck on the south side of the house. When he saw that Rob was still in his chair, he said, "Girls, go to your room." The two dogs promptly went through their door. Rob found it eerie how well they listened to Angus Blair. Blair sat down across from Rob and said, "Your car is hidden now. I'll keep the keys. I will have to think about what to do with you. There's something on my mind, and I hope you can answer. What happened to Katie that made her act strangely in Kakabeka Falls? People thought she was drunk. I need to understand what caused her odd behavior." Rob hoped the answer would ease his worry about Katie. "I gave her something to make her forget about her trip here. It causes memory loss and worked very well. Side effects can include feeling sick and confused, but it didn't hurt her. She doesn't have any idea where we are," Angus said with a pleased smile, as if he was proud of the answer. "Is that why Erin seemed unwell when you had her at the Grand Portage Casino? Why did you take her there?" Rob was genuinely curious. "She probably doesn't even remember being there," Angus replied. "I just needed to wait a couple of hours until the border guards changed on the Canadian side. A friend of mine works nights there, so I thought we would have no trouble crossing." Rob was still worried about them being given something and asked, "What did you give them? I want to know what it was." "I suppose it doesn't matter if I tell you. It was a powerful sedative. It works as promised," he said, grinning with satisfaction. "That's troubling," Rob replied, feeling a growing sense of concern. "That's known for its misuse. What kind of person are you?" Rob was really angry now, thinking that his wife and daughter had been given the drug for more than just forgetting the trip. He tried to grab Angus Blair in frustration, but was too far away. "I'm not like that," Blair said. "When Aaron agrees to marry me, then maybe." He seemed to really want Rob to believe that he hadn't harmed Aaron or Katie. "I brought Katie here because Aaron was so sad. She cried every night, calling out Katie's name and yours too. I thought bringing Katie would cheer her up, but now she seems even sadder." He looked a bit upset as he said that. Rob was confused. "You brought my daughter here to try to make Aaron happy? How did you think that would help?" "I don't know. I need to think now, so please be quiet." Rob watched as Angus Blair turned to look out of the window. He decided not to interrupt, thinking about how to get out of this situation. After a few minutes, Angus turned back and said, "I have to get you out of here. I need to make sure Aaron and Katie never know you were here. It's getting too dark for that now. In the morning, I have to take care of it." Angus stood up and went to the kitchen counter, where he picked up a lamp and brought it over to the table, turning it on. The light improved the room a lot, and Rob noticed how dark it had become. Angus then walked through a door that seemed to lead to the bedrooms. He came back a couple of minutes later with a pillow, a blanket, and a box containing some shiny things that Rob couldn't see clearly. After tossing the pillow and blanket on the sofa, he brought the box to the table. "Put your right leg up on the chair beside you." Rob did what he was told, looking confused. Angus took something from the box. Rob saw it had a loop and a padlock on one end, with a few metal pieces attached to the other end. His shoe was taken off his right foot, and the two curved metal pieces were put around his ankle. Then, a lock was quickly closed into the holes on the metal pieces, securing it tightly. Rob felt it was very tight and complained to Angus, but it didn't matter. Angus then uncoiled a metal cable connected to the pieces and ran it to the floor, attaching it to a round metal ring sticking up. Rob noticed the cable was pulled tight, giving him a little bit of space to move around within a 10-foot area. It looked like he was going to spend the night on the sofa with his ankle held in place. "Do you like my security setup? It has worked well on Aaron and Katie." "You shouldn't pull too hard or you might hurt yourself. Don't even think about breaking that cable. It's made from strong steel. The locks are sturdy too. You aren't going anywhere." "I was wondering how you kept them here." "You're treating them worse than your dogs," Rob said angrily, upset with how Blair was handling Aaron and Katie. "Most of the time, they don't need to be secured. I just lock their door. It's only when I leave that I have to use the restraints." He suddenly reached for Rob's right hand, and with a quick turn of a small key, the handcuff released from Rob's wrist. It happened so fast that Rob couldn't catch him as he jumped back. The cable kept Rob stretched out and unable to move in his chair. Angus approached him from behind, and Rob couldn't turn to face him. After a moment, he felt his chair being pushed back a bit, and he could finally place his right foot on the floor. "You won't be able to get to the bathroom from there, so I'm leaving you a pail and a flashlight. No excuses for a mess in the morning. I'm going to bed now. The dogs won't disturb you." He moved his shotgun to a corner, far from Rob's reach. He looked around to ensure there was nothing in Rob's area that could be used against him, then left the room with the lantern. Rob was left alone in the dark, thinking about how to help his family. Rob got up from the chair and walked over to the sofa. The clamp on his ankle was uncomfortable, and he wasn't sure how he would manage all night. He picked up the flashlight and turned it on, pleased to see it was bright and seemed to have good batteries. He hoped it would last, as he would need it to find a way to free himself and help his family. Sitting on the sofa, he brought his right ankle up to rest on his left knee and examined the device holding him in place. It seemed Angus was right about how it was made. His only chance was to somehow pick the lock around his ankle. He decided to wait about 15 minutes to make sure Angus wouldn't walk in on him while he tried to escape. He needed something to work on the lock, so he began searching his pockets and looking around the small area he could reach. There wasn't much around him, and his pockets were almost empty. He wished he had brought his pocket knife, but it was at home in Duluth. To unlock the door, he needed something to create tension. He also needed a pick, and right now, he had neither. On the other side of the sofa, there was a magazine rack filled with papers, magazines, and other reading items. He decided to look through it for a large staple that he could use as a pick. Instead, he was happy to find a small stack of papers held together with a paperclip. That solved part of his problem, but he still needed a tool to turn the lock. After searching his area twice, he found nothing he could use. He looked at his watch. It was almost midnight. There would be no sleep tonight. He needed to get free by morning. Even with 6 hours ahead of him to work on his restraint, he felt nervous. He didn't have any clear solution. Without something for tension, he couldn't pick the lock. As he thought about his situation, he shifted on the sofa and heard the springs squeak. An idea struck him. Maybe he could break off a piece of spring or find some metal in the sofa. He lay down at the edge of the sofa and tore away a piece of the cloth underneath. Unfortunately, the springs were too big to help. His anxiety grew and he could feel his heart racing. Realizing he needed to calm down and think, he sat back on the sofa and leaned his head on the cushion. He went through the things in his pockets but couldn't find anything useful. He thought about the tab on his jacket zipper, but found it too small to grasp. Removing his last shoe, he checked it with the light, looking for anything metal, but found nothing. Feeling desperate, he pulled off the sofa cushions and looked underneath with his flashlight, hoping to find something helpful. He only discovered some pocket change. Just when he thought he wouldn't find anything, he remembered his belt. Maybe he could use the metal part of the buckle. He quickly took off his belt and examined the shape and size of the buckle's prong. It seemed a bit too thick and wide. He knew he needed to change the buckle to use it properly. As he worried about how to make the buckle work, he noticed the fireplace on the other side of the room. The hearth was made of stone, and he thought that if it was the right kind, it could help him shape the buckle. He couldn't reach it while standing, but if he lay down and crawled, he might be able to. Within moments, he was on his stomach and could indeed reach the fireplace. One of the stones had a rough surface that he could use to reshape the metal. He began to rub the metal piece against the stone. Day 17. After more than an hour of rubbing the stone, he finally shaped the metal into the form he needed. It resembled the tip of a small screwdriver, narrow and thin. He hoped it would work. The continuous movement had taken some skin off 2 of his fingers, and his elbows were sore from being on the floor. When he finished, he checked his watch and saw it was already 1:15 a.m. He placed the cushions back on the sofa and sat down to work on the lock. It quickly became clear that the lock was moving too much, making it hard to feel how the pins were moving. After tearing strips from the pillowcase, he tied them around the lock to keep it steady. Now that it was secure, he could use his handmade tool to apply pressure while he worked with a straightened paper clip to push the pins. It had been years since he last tried to open a lock this way. A coworker had taught him how, when they needed to get into a locked filing cabinet, that lock had opened quickly. He doubted this one would be as simple. It seemed to have 5 pins, which would be tricky to manage, but he planned to handle them one at a time. Rob continued to work on the lock, often needing to start over when things didn't go right. He was careful not to apply too much pressure to the metal piece, fearing it might break. But feeling desperate pushed him to apply more force. Just as he was starting to think he wouldn't be able to pick the lock, he felt it give and heard the satisfying sound of it unlocking. He paused, unsure if it was really open since so much time had passed. He untied the strips of fabric, pulled the lock away, and felt the restraint around his ankle come loose. By now, his right leg was almost completely numb, and after he removed the restraint, he had to use both hands to lower his leg to the floor. After a few moments of resting, he looked at his watch and saw that it was 3:45. He moved his ankle and gently rubbed his knee and calf muscles. Gradually, feeling started to come back to his right leg. When it felt ready, he stood up slowly to see if it could hold him. It seemed fine, so he began to think about what to do next. During the time he had been alone, he noticed he hadn't heard anything from the 2 dogs. He realized they were a top concern. Until they were safely secured, he would be in danger. He knew they could attack if they felt threatened, and he was more afraid of them than of Angus Blair. He had to find a way to lock their door without them noticing. He figured they would investigate if he got too close. Luckily, the change he made to his belt buckle was nearly silent. The only noise that might have caught their attention was the sound of the lock clicking open. With thoughts of the dogs in his mind, he carefully moved toward the shotgun resting against the wall in the living room. He knew it could be important, so he quietly opened the latch, holding it closed, and checked that the gun was loaded. After securing it again, he tiptoed toward the door that led to the dogs, hoping he wouldn't need to use the weapon. He worried about what Angus Blair might do if he heard any sounds. It took him nearly 15 minutes to cross the living room and reach the door where the 2 dogs were resting. He was careful to avoid making any noise with his footsteps or the floorboards. When he finally got close to the door, he felt relieved. He carefully closed the latch and quietly placed the lock on it, making sure it didn't snap loudly. He sighed in relief, knowing he only had to worry about their owner now. As he stepped back from the door, he heard soft growling, confirming that the lock had worked. Now that he no longer had to fear the dogs, Rob decided to unload the shotgun. A weapon like that could cause serious harm, and with his family nearby, he didn't want it to be fired. He quietly took out the shells and put the gun back where it had been, leaning against the wall. He hid the shells under the sofa, making sure they wouldn't be easy to find. Angus might have more weapons, but it didn't seem they were in this room. Knowing it wouldn't be wise to stir up the dogs, he remained quiet as he searched the kitchen for something that could help him deal with Angus Blair. He quietly opened the cutlery drawer and was surprised to find there were no large utensils. Rob searched through all the drawers but couldn't find the knives. He guessed that Angus was keeping them somewhere safe, away from Aaron and Katie. The only thing he could find to use as a tool was a wooden rolling pin. He took that and a spoon with him. After placing the rolling pin on the sofa, he crept to the dog's room and used the spoon to unlock the door. He bent the spoon to create a lock that would take some time to open. The low growls from the dogs reminded him they were aware of his presence. With his main tasks done, Rob moved quietly to the hallway door. He used a flashlight briefly to check that the deadbolt was secure. He realized he couldn't get into that part of the house until Angus opened the door. It was important not to raise any suspicions, so Angus wouldn't feel the need to stay with Aaron and Katie. He looked around the kitchen and living room to see if everything was as it should be. As far as he could tell, everything looked the same as when Angus had last been there. He returned to the sofa and put the clamp loosely around his ankle, hoping it wouldn't be noticed if Angus came back. Now, he needed a plan for when Angus returned. Rob wanted to avoid a serious confrontation, especially if Aaron or Katie came out to see what was happening. He hadn't seen or heard them, but he believed they were safe. If they weren't, Angus would have had no reason to keep him there overnight. The more Rob thought about it, the more he worried that Angus had harmful intentions. He didn't want Aaron or Katie to realize he was there, and based on Angus's words the night before, Rob was becoming more worried. When he looked at his watch, it was just after 5 a.m. He knew he wouldn't have to wait much longer. Although he hadn't slept, he felt wide awake. It was likely the adrenaline keeping him alert, and he needed to be ready. The uncertainty of when Angus would return was his biggest worry. It would be tough to stay focused if Angus didn't show up for another few hours. Rob knew he needed to be ready to act immediately if the hallway door opened. Finally, Rob decided his best chance was to surprise Angus as he entered the kitchen from the hallway. Anything else might give Angus the upper hand. If Angus stepped first to his left, he would see the makeshift lock on the door to the dog's room. If Rob was too far away, Angus could escape back through the secured hallway door. Even if he turned another way, he might find a way to regain the upper hand. Rob thought his best chance was to surprise Angus when he came into the kitchen from the hallway. He would need to wait in hiding there. The only tool Rob had besides the rolling pin was one he had taken from a kitchen drawer, so he took it with him and positioned himself around the corner from the hallway door. After waiting for a long time, he felt his legs and feet starting to tire. He could only hope he would be able to move quickly when the time came. He kept standing there, stretching his legs and feet every now and then to stay ready. After what felt like a very long wait, Rob heard the soft sound of the key turning in the hallway door lock. He tensed and lifted the rolling pin in his right hand, prepared to act. The door opened, and as he peeked around the corner, he saw Angus Blair come out of the hallway and begin to move toward the room with his two dogs. Rob swung the rolling pin, hitting him lightly above his right ear. Angus fell to the floor without making a sound. Rob couldn't believe it had gone so smoothly. He had expected a long struggle, not something that felt so simple. Rob quickly grabbed Angus by the back of his shirt collar and began to drag him toward the sofa. When he got close enough, he took off Angus's left shoe and secured his ankle with a clamp. Then, Rob checked for a pulse. It felt strong and steady, so he looked for any cuts on his head, but only found a bump above his ear. It seemed like Angus was not seriously hurt, and he didn't need medical help. Rob wondered if he could have helped him if necessary, but fortunately, he didn't have to make that choice. Now that Angus was unable to move, Rob carefully emptied his pockets into the pillowcase he had set down on the floor. He really wanted to find the keys to the locks. If he left them in Angus's pockets, it wouldn't take long for him to escape from the clamp if he woke up. Rob found 2 key rings in Angus's pockets, along with his own key ring, which he used for his car hidden behind the garage. There was a small key loose in Rob's shirt pocket that he guessed could unlock the handcuffs. He held on to it as he carried a pillowcase filled with things from his pockets to the kitchen table. The little key opened the handcuffs from under the kitchen table. Rob quickly took them to where Angus was lying on the floor. After rolling him onto his side, Rob was able to pull both hands behind him and secure them with the handcuffs. He checked Angus's pulse and breathing, making sure everything was fine, then gave the locks a gentle tug to confirm they were secure. Satisfied with how things were, Rob picked up the flashlight and key rings and headed towards the bedroom area. The hallway was dark. As he swept the light along the wall in front of him, he saw the first door was open, letting a little light shine out. He peeked inside and saw an empty bed and a coal oil lamp on an otherwise bare dresser. This looked like Angus's room, so he moved on. The next door had no lock. When he opened it, he found a bathroom. The last door at the end of the hallway had a deadbolt lock and a standard doorknob. Rob started checking the keys on the 2 key rings he had taken from Angus, looking for one that might fit the lock on the last door. After a moment, he found a key that seemed right and tried it in the lock. His heart raced as he turned the key and opened the door. Inside the room, he saw 2 single beds with people sleeping under the covers. He turned on his flashlight and walked to the nearest bed. Shining the light on the pillow, he recognized Katie. He knelt beside her and gently shook her shoulder. Her eyes opened wide with surprise. Rob pointed the flashlight to his face and said, "Katie, wake up. It's your dad, and I'm here to take you home." Katie sat up quickly and exclaimed, "Daddy, how did you find us? I'm so glad to see you." Just then, Rob heard movement behind him and turned to see Erin jumping out of her bed with her fists up, ready to protect herself. He quickly caught her as he stood, and she yelled, "Leave her alone! You can't take her!" Rob spoke gently. "Erin, it's me, Rob. I've come to take you home." He continued, "Erin, you're safe now." He freed one arm and held the flashlight up so she could see it was really him. He saw the surprise on her face. Her mouth was open, but no words came out. After a moment, she managed to ask, "Rob, where did you come from? How did you find us? This isn't a dream, is it?" "It's not a dream, honey. I found you last night and I had to wait until morning to get out. He can't cause any problems now." While he spoke to Erin, Katie had gotten up and was now leaning against him. He could hear her softly crying, and when Erin joined in, he felt a rush of feelings. He couldn't believe he had finally found his family, and they were safe. They held each other for a few minutes, feeling relieved and joyful that their difficult time was over. As they felt more at ease, they started to move apart, wiping their tears and sharing smiles as the flashlight's light flickered over their faces. Rob then stepped back and said, "How about you two get dressed? I'll leave the flashlight with you and go get a lamp." As he left the room, his wife and daughter shared a warm hug before reaching for their clothes. Rob went to Angus's room and picked up the lamp. When he returned to the room with his wife and daughter, they were almost dressed. He placed the lamp on the dresser and said, "Pack your things. We won't be here long. I hope we can leave within an hour." "How did you find us, Daddy? We don't even know where we are, and he wouldn't tell us." "Well, it all started with that phone call you tried to make from Grand Marais. That helped me and the police know where to look. I mainly found a cash register receipt that our friend Angus dropped in your room. Once I figured out where it came from, it wasn't too hard to find you." Rob gave his daughter a comforting hug and added, "You two get ready. I will make sure everything is safe." When Rob reached the living room, he saw Angus was still unable to move, so he poured a glass of water from the kitchen. He went back to Angus and splashed some water on his face. Angus started to shake his head and try to move. After a moment, he opened his eyes and looked around in confusion. Finally, he focused on Rob and shouted, "Let me go! You can't do this! Erin is meant to be with me! I've waited years for this place for us. You have to let me go." "You should get used to the idea that you won't be with her," Rob replied firmly. "Once we leave here, you won't see her again. You might spend a long time in jail for what you've done." Rob walked back to the kitchen and put the glass on the counter. He watched as Angus struggled against his restraints, seemingly unaware that he was also held at the leg. As Rob looked at him, he heard the 2 dogs scratching at the door, starting when Angus began shouting. The door jiggled slightly, but it seemed the lock would hold. Rob glanced at his watch. It was after 6 a.m. He hoped they would be home by dinner since they had a lot of driving to do and needed to talk to the police in Canada before heading to Minnesota. Just then, Erin and Katie came out of the hallway, each carrying a suitcase. Erin walked over, wrapped her arms around him and said, "I still can't believe you're actually here. This feels like a dream. For weeks I hoped for today, but I never thought I would see it. He made me believe that no one could find us here. Where are we exactly?" "You are at his parents' old summer house near Lac des Mille Lacs, about 12 miles west of Uppsala, Ontario, Canada. He gave both of you something to help you sleep so you wouldn't remember how you got here from Duluth. I really don't understand how he thought he could succeed. He must be out of touch with reality. You might be right. Angus was in my class for the last 2 years of high school. He always seemed a bit strange then, and now he is much worse. While I've been here, he has been completely sure that I would one day marry him. I told him many times that he was wrong, but he never listened. Aaron hugged Rob and then faced Katie, who was watching Angus as he shifted nervously. Poor Katie. She is here because when I was really upset, I would call for her and for you too, Rob. One day, Angus went away and left me locked in my room with some food and a bucket. He said he would be back before dark. When he returned, he had Katie with him. He claimed he brought her to cheer me up. It was the worst moment of my life, realizing he took our daughter just to try to make me happy enough to marry him. I can't imagine how that felt. When we found out that he took both you and Katie, we didn't understand why. You wouldn't believe how hard it was to make the police see that I wasn't behind your disappearances. They thought you both left on your own since your suitcases, clothes, and personal things were gone. I don't think they looked for you very hard because they thought you left with him. I've been curious about how he got you to go along with him. What happened the day you disappeared? Erin put her arm around Rob's shoulder and leaned against him as she spoke. That morning he came to our door with 2 cappuccinos. He said he heard that was where I lived and wanted to visit for a bit to remember old times. I think he may have slipped something into my drink, because I can't recall much past sitting in the kitchen with him. When he showed up, he seemed so normal that I thought the strange Angus from school was gone. I was very wrong. All I remember is sitting at our table and then waking up later with no idea how much time had passed. What about Katie? How did he convince her to go with him? Rob was really interested in that. Katie, who had been listening, answered his question. He knocked on the door right after you went to work and told me he could take me to my mom. I let him in, and once inside, he scared me by saying he would hurt me if I didn't take the 2 pills he gave me. After that, I don't remember much until we arrived here. I was really surprised to see Mom here. Aaron smiled and pulled him closer, which made Angus struggle even more. He yelled at Rob to leave Aaron alone. I'm just so glad you kept looking. Angus was getting really desperate to get me to marry him, and I wasn't sure what he would do next. The 2 dogs were locked in their room and getting really excited, jumping against the door hard enough to shake it. Rob thought it was a good idea to make sure the dogs couldn't break free, so he asked Aaron and Katie to help him move the heavy wooden table against the door. Even though it was heavy, it moved a little when the dogs hit the door hard. Rob gave Aaron his car keys and said, "Why don't you bring the car up front so we can get ready to go? I'll put our friend here in his room. He will be more comfortable while he waits for the police." As Aaron left, Rob walked over to the struggling Angus with a rolling pin in his hand and told him to calm down or he would have to use it again. When Angus finally stopped struggling, Rob unlocked the cable from the hook and quickly wrapped it around his leg a few times. "Okay, Angus, you can get up now, but if you try anything funny, I'll pull on this cable and you'll lose your balance. I want you to walk to your room." Angus managed to get to his feet, and there was enough slack in the cable for him to limp to his room. Once Angus was settled, Rob removed the cable. With Angus lying quietly on his side, Rob took off the handcuff from his right wrist and pulled his left arm to the head of the bed, attaching the free handcuff to the bed frame. After doing that, he stepped back and told Angus to get comfortable. "You think you've won, don't you? Erin is going to be my wife, and nothing will stop me." Angus raised his voice again, trying to pull his left hand out of the handcuff. Rob left the room and went back to where Aaron and Katie had been. He picked up the oil lamp and took it back to Angus's room, placing it on the dresser. As Angus continued to yell and struggle, Rob said, "Maybe I should just drop that lamp on the floor and leave. It would make things a lot easier, wouldn't it?" Angus kept struggling with the handcuff as Rob left the room. Aaron had brought the car to the front of the house, and she and Katie were putting their suitcases in the trunk. Rob took one last look around the living room, saw his belt on the sofa, and put it back on. He glanced at the door, keeping the 2 dogs inside, and joined his wife and daughter outside. He wrapped his arm around Katie and asked, "How are you doing? How are you feeling?" Katie hugged her father tightly and replied, "I'll be okay. I just hope he never comes back to bother us again. I don't know if I can handle going through this again. Aaron said. "I'm sure we're safe now. Once this is over, he'll be locked up for a long time. Let's get in the car and leave," Rob replied. The three of them climbed into the car with Rob in the driver's seat. Aaron sat next to him, and he reached for her hand. She held it tightly and said, "Angus might try this again if he gets the chance. Do you think he'll say he has issues? I really hope he doesn't come back here." Rob started the car and drove a little way before stopping to look at Aaron. "I'm going back to make sure he will never bother us again. I'll make it clear that he can't come near us." He parked the car and stepped out. He opened the trunk and was looking for something when Aaron asked, "What's your father doing? Can you see Katie?" Katie peeked through the trunk. "He took an old rag and some gloves. Now he's going inside." As Rob went back into the house, he slipped on an old pair of gloves kept for working on the car. He shut the door behind him. For a few minutes, the dogs barked and leaped at their door, pushing against the table that blocked it. Instead of getting tired, they seemed more determined. Their makeshift lock was holding. When Rob came back through the hallway, he looked at the dog's door. He pushed the table back to its place and removed the spoon that kept it shut. He tossed the spoon and some old handcuffs onto the table and hurried outside, leaving the front door open. Once he reached the car, he put the tire wrench back in the trunk and closed it. As he got in, Aaron asked, "Did you really have to go back in there, Rob?" "I just wanted to make sure he knows he can't bother us anymore. He knows now," Rob said as he started the car and drove slowly up the lane. When he turned onto the access road, he looked in the rearview mirror and saw the two dogs running from the house. He pressed the accelerator and headed towards the highway. Aaron and Katie sat quietly as Rob drove down the gravel road and onto the highway. The tension they had felt was lifting, and they began to ask Rob many questions about how he found them and how their friends and family were reacting. As Rob drove, he did his best to answer while watching the road ahead. They were about 5 miles down the highway when he saw a cloud of black smoke rising above the trees. As they got closer to Uppsala, Rob asked if they were hungry. They said they were, so he pulled into a gas station and restaurant where he had eaten the night before. They went inside for breakfast. While Aaron and Katie looked at the menu, Rob stood up and went to the bulletin board near the cash register. He took down a poster he had put up the night before and brought it back to the table. "I must have put up 700 of these since Katie went missing. Don't be surprised if people recognize you for a while." While they waited for their food, Rob called Sergeant O'Brien from the Ontario Provincial Police. He shared the good news that he had found his wife and daughter and that they were safe. He also told him how the police could locate Angus Blair. Before hanging up, he mentioned they would stop by the office to give official statements. Next, he called Jim Randall. When Jim answered, Rob handed the phone to Aaron. She happily told her brother that she and Katie were safe and should be back in Duluth that evening. Rob's last call was to Detective Mackey. When he got through, he said, "I found them. My wife and daughter are back with me." Detective Mackey was thrilled and said, "I'm so glad to hear they're okay. I honestly never thought this would end well." Before ending the call, Detective Mackey agreed to notify the media and state police, and he would contact the Grand Marais police to let everyone know that the search for Katie and Aaron Walsh was over. By this time, their meals had arrived, and they all ate together as a family for the first time in almost 4 months. When they arrived at the Ontario Provincial Police Office, Rob took Aaron and Katie to see Sergeant O'Brien. The sergeant led them to a quiet room and offered them coffee before starting to take their statements. Sergeant O'Brien began, "What was happening at the summer home when you left? Can you describe what it was like when you drove away?" Rob explained that he had returned to talk to Angus Blair just before they left and had warned him not to bother them again. He also mentioned he had taken a tire iron with him for safety. Aaron and Katie confirmed this to the sergeant. "Just after your call, we got a report from the Ministry of Natural Resources about a fire at the Blair summer home. They had a fire crew with helicopters and a water bomber just 5 miles away, and they managed to control the fire within an hour. Their team set up hoses and a pump at the lake, preventing major damage. There was a body inside, and once the area cools down, investigators will be sent to look into it. It seems that Mr. Blair is no longer with us." Rob, Aaron, and Katie exchanged worried glances as Sergeant O'Brien shared this news. Katie expressed what they were all thinking, saying, "I guess we won't have to worry about him anymore." The sergeant studied Rob closely and asked, "You say you brought a tire iron in with you. I'll need to take that for testing. You're not being accused of anything, but until we know more, I have to consider your story as just one possible explanation." "I understand, and you can do what you need for the investigation. I'll give you my keys so you can check my trunk. I probably won't need my tire iron, so feel free to keep it. If you need anything else, just let me know," Rob said, meeting the sergeant's gaze. The next half hour was spent getting statements from Aaron and Katie about their experiences. The sergeant explained that the kidnapping had occurred in Minnesota, but they would address that later. Once they finished signing their statements, he left the room. When they were alone, Aaron asked, "You didn't have anything to do with that fire, did you?" "Of course not. He must have caused that himself." Rob took her hand and said, "I'm just glad you won't have to worry about him anymore." They chatted as they waited for the sergeant to return. After about 15 minutes, he came back with several pages of notes. "I spoke with the first officer who arrived at the scene of the fire, and he had some interesting information. He entered the bedroom where the body was found and saw what seemed to be an injury in the man's chest, along with something that looked like a firearm next to him. He said the room was badly burned, and that a thorough investigation would be needed to find out exactly what happened." The sergeant looked at Rob and asked, "Do you own a firearm, Mr. Walsh?" "Yes, I do. I got a permit to carry one just this past Saturday and bought a firearm that day." "I would like to see that firearm if you don't mind." "Well, the cashier at the gas station across the border told me firearms are illegal here, so I left my lockbox and firearm at the store." Rob took a receipt from his wallet and handed it to Sergeant O'Brien. "This is the receipt they gave me." Sergeant O'Brien examined the receipt and asked, "Is this all they gave you?" "It shows you left a lockbox, but it doesn't mention a firearm. The firearm is inside the box. If you want, I can give you the combination, and you can contact them for confirmation. They can open the box and find out what's inside." Sergeant O'Brien accepted Rob's offer and took the receipt and a note with the combination for the lockbox. He was gone for about 10 minutes, and when he came back, he looked pleased. "What you told me has been confirmed. They found a .25 caliber gun in the box. I hope you understand that I had to check this for my job." The Walsh family waited another half hour while Sergeant O'Brien looked at the trunk of their car and took out a tire iron in a plastic bag. He told Rob that the tire iron did not seem to have been used in any harmful way, but they would still need to do some tests. It was noon when the family could finally leave and head home. They stopped for lunch at the Angry Trout Cafe in Grand Marais and reached their home in Duluth by dinner time. Epilogue. After they got home, all three of them visited Dr. Gloria Baker. Aaron, in particular, needed some help to cope with what she had gone through. There had not been any physical harm, but it took her some time to feel better mentally. Katie returned to her normal self in a few weeks and started her next year of high school without any trouble. Rob spent a lot of time with Dr. Baker, and even after he stopped seeing her, Aaron noticed he seemed quieter and more reflective than he was before she had been away. The Ontario Provincial Police kept looking into Angus Blair's death and called Rob and Aaron for more details several times. One time, Sergeant O'Brien came to Duluth to get a sworn statement from Rob about what happened the morning they left. After that, they did not hear anything for about 6 months. Almost a year after Katie was taken, they received a letter from the Ontario Provincial Police saying that Angus Blair's death was ruled a suicide and that no more investigation would be done.